called the US electoral process archaic during her weekly press briefing. Zakharova also said that it was important to avoid any occurrence of mass riots in the US. Remember, security has been beefed up across multiple cities, anticipating civil unrest, as both protesters and supporters of the Trump administration await results. Now, even on Kenya's television news, the US election is top priority. There are more than 20,000 Americans in Kenya, so the interest in the election outcome is still running high. In fact, bets and memes followed as Kenyans followed polling trends across social media platforms.
We follow with keen interest because there are lots of Kenyans in the diaspora who live in the United States. We receive about 100 billion shillings in diaspora remittances every year as a country. So therefore we have a lot of relatives who stay there. We follow with keen interest what is happening there.
Even though tensions have run high between the US and China in recent months, Beijing's residents watched the tight race glued to their television sets with a mix of curiosity and excitement. Meanwhile, in Iran, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khomeini mocked the delayed results and likened it to a spectacle. In addition, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said that no matter who the next US president is, he will have to surrender to Iran. Remember that the Trump administration has led a campaign of maximum pressure against Iran, even pulling Washington out of a multilateral deal on Iran's nuclear program. A look at Europe now. Be it across France, Germany, Italy, Cuba, or even Mexico, in other parts of the world, the controversial US election dominated the news cycle everywhere, and even now, with no precedent in sight, the anticipation runs high across the world.
I think it depends who you ask. For Israel, I think the bipartisanship nature of Israel's relationship with the United States is paramount. But at the same time, there's obviously no denying that under President Trump, he has been one of the greatest friends of the state of Israel in the White House, whether you look at it in terms of his actions on Iran, withdrawing from the Iran deal, which is obviously a major concern for Israel. If you look at his steps on recognizing Jerusalem, moving the embassy on Golan Heights, on funding for the Palestinians, supported the UN, and of course, most recently with 3 peace agreements with United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan. Prime Minister Netanyahu does have a good relationship with Joe Biden, but at the end of the day, I would think, irrespective of who is at the White House, Israel would certainly hope that the strong policy on Iran and the Middle East would continue. That said, Biden and Democrats have indicated they would look to re-engage with Iran, which would pose some concern to Israel.
A US presidential election is down to 5 key battleground states. The 2 candidates are leading and trailing by a few decimal points. The decision to take the matter to court has not turned out to be in favor of the Trump campaign. He has lost court rulings in 2 closely contested states. In Georgia, the Trump campaign alleged 53 late arriving ballots were mixed with on-time ballots. A judge in Georgia has said that there is no evidence that ballots in question were invalid. In Michigan, Trump campaign sought to stop the vote count and demanded a greater access to the tabulation process. In this case, court has said, and I quote, "No basis to find substantial likelihood of success on the merits." The Trump campaign has vowed to bring a new lawsuit challenging what they call voting irregularities in Nevada. Now, Trump's aides have time and again fallen short of providing evidence to support their allegations. But election officials who are working on ground say that there is no evidence of improper ballots being processed. Now, remember, Georgia, Nevada and Pennsylvania are 3 of the 5 battleground states where vote counting is still going on. These 3 states will play a very crucial role in determining who will win the presidency. On the other hand, Joe Biden has already won Michigan by 3% more votes than Donald Trump. Election legal experts say that Trump's legal strategy is unlikely to have a decisive impact on the outcome of this election. Let's also have a look at what misinformation has been doing to this election and what initiatives have been taken to control it. Social media giant Facebook has taken down a rapidly growing pro-Trump group from the platform. The group has been removed from Facebook for posting violent rhetoric and baseless claims about Democrats stealing the election. Facebook's spokesperson in a statement said, and I quote, "The group was organized around the delegitimization of the election process and they saw worrying calls for violence from its members. The Stop the Steal group, which called for boots on the ground to protect the integrity of the vote, was adding 1,000 new members every 10 seconds on Thursday and had grown to huge numbers of 365,000 members in a single day." According to Facebook, the move was in line with the exceptional measures the social media giant is taking during this period of heightened tension. However, supporters of the group criticized the deletion, saying that the move came without any warning. Chris Barron, a spokesman for the group, said the political opponents were also voicing concerns over the election being stolen and organizing for protests, but did not face the same problems. And so Donald Trump and his Republican supporters have been laying the groundwork to cast doubt on the integrity of the mail-in voting for months now. Several social media companies have been showing less patience for election-related disinformation on their sites. On Thursday, Snap Incorporated Snapchat removed a video from Trump's account in which Biden said he has an extensive voter fraud organization. Biden's statement came during an interview in which he was discussing his team fighting voter suppression efforts. And with that, let's now bring you other international stories we're tracking this hour. There's one big story coming in from Russia. Is Russian President Vladimir Putin suffering from the Parkinson's disease? That's the big buzz doing the round not only in Russia but all over the world. According to various media reports, Putin is planning to step down as early as January next year. Reports also suggest that Putin has taken the decision as he's suffering from the nervous system disorder. The allegations on Putin's health were first made by a critic of the Russian president. Professor Valery Solovey has also alleged that Putin's gymnast lover Elena Kabayeva, along with his daughters Maria Vorontsova and Katerina Tikhanova, have been urging him to step down. This after concerns were raised over the 68-year-old strongman's deteriorating health. Professor Valery Solovey said, and I quote, "There is a family. It has a great influence on him. He intends to make public his handover plans in January." Now, the Parkinson's disease leads to a disorder in the nervous system. Reports suggest Putin is showing early symptoms of the disease. Some observers note that Putin's legs are in a constant state of motion. Others note that Putin was recently struggling to hold a pen steadily in his hand. Some have even pointed fingers at his gunslinger gait, which is Putin's signature style of walking with a shorter swing of the right arm. However, this has already been dismissed by British Medical Journal back in the year 2015, which stated that the style of walking may be the result of KGB weaponry training, where trainees are taught to keep their right hand close to the chest while walking, allowing them to quickly draw a gun when faced with a foe. And so the Kremlin, meanwhile, has dismissed reports questioning Putin's health. Kremlin spokesman and Deputy Chief of Staff Dmitry Peskov called them complete nonsense. The Kremlin claims Putin has no plans to retire whatsoever. Adding to the speculation over Putin's health is his backing to a bill that will virtually grant him immunity for life. Critics say this is a clear indication that Putin is planning to retire and hand over power to a successor. The new bill would make Putin a senator for life and guarantee him lifelong immunity after office. Immunity would be extended to all Russian presidents once they leave office and save them from any form of criminal prosecution. The bill still needs backing of a two-thirds majority from Russia's twin legislative chambers. Before it is ascended to law, observers say the bill is an indication that Putin is planning a transfer of power. Putin's camp once again dismissed reports linking the new bill to any plans to step down. Putin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says, and I quote again, "This is the practice that is being applied in many countries of the world and it is quite justified. This is not innovation from the point of view of international practice." Also, the 8th round of top military level talks between India and China are currently underway to de-escalate border tensions along the line of actual control. Amid this, India's Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat has warned that India will not accept shifting of the line of actual control. General Rawat added that China's PLA is facing unanticipated consequences for its misadventure in Ladakh because of firm responses by the Indian forces. Let's listen in to what he has to say.
The situation along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh remains tense, and the PLA is facing unanticipated consequences of its misadventure in Ladakh because of the Indian Defence Forces' firm and strong response. Our posturing is unambiguous. We will not accept any shifting of the line of actual control. In the overall security calculus, border confrontations, transgressions, and unprovoked tactical military actions spiraling into a larger conflict cannot therefore be discontinued.
Over to the world of business, and contrary to the expectations, US markets are not nervous over uncertainty in presidential election in world's largest economy. This time, US markets have soared despite no clarity on the new president in the short term, as investors expect a very less probability of big sweeping legislative changes as a result of the divided government. Shares in US markets have also gained as investors expect the close race to be reducing the likelihood of big possible changes, including an increase in the corporate tax rate proposed by Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. A potential divided government also means taxes won't go up, antitrust scrutiny could stay in check, and the China trade war does not get any worse. The sentiment in stock markets has also got a boost from better than expected earnings of some major firms, including Qualcomm and General Motors yesterday. Majorly, the US stock markets have been resilient to rising coronavirus cases so far, as US market is not going into a major lockdown like European markets. Also, in its policy statement released yesterday, the US Central Bank has said that economic activity continued to recover, though it remained well below pre-pandemic levels. Federal Chairman Jerome Powell said more fiscal action was needed to prop up the economy. Though he said the growth outlook remained murky, the risk of a worst-case scenario for the economy had receded. And that's all I have for you in this edition of Your Story. Thank you so much for watching. Up next is our co-production with Voice of America. Stay tuned for the latest on US election.
Your Story, in association with Asian Paints Royale Health Shield, the antibacterial paint.
WION VOA co-production, US Election 2020. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services, transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra, life's wonderful moments, styled by Myntra. Driven by Ford, presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus, Isko Laga Dala to Full Family Jingalala.
Donald Trump is stoking suspicions of the election being stolen from him by the Democrats. At the same time, pro- and anti-Trump protesters have held demonstrations across the United States. Trump's chances of re-entering the White House continue to falter after his lawsuits in Georgia and Michigan were dismissed. Hello and a very warm welcome to WION VOA co-production, our special presentation on US election. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, many Americans are surprised that the US presidential election has been so closely fought, reflecting the deep divide within the country. VOA's Elizabeth Lee hears from two different realities in America.
The U.S. may be one country, but as the presidential election shows, Americans seem to be living in two different realities, depending on their political preferences. This man, who only gives his first name as Jeff, is a Biden supporter.
I'm sick to my stomach. And have been. I don't understand. I don't recognize this country anymore. I really don't. I think Donald Trump broke it.
Beth Jordan supports Trump.
Well, he improved the economy, in my opinion. My 401k is up. My rates are up. I make more money now, and my stocks have increased, and I'm earning more money.
These two views reflect a deep divide in the country.
We're divided on partisan and ideological lines. We're divided on many issues, social and economic. We're divided in, our opinions and our reactions to the pandemic.
Election night was not the blue wave Democrats had hoped. Polls had shown Biden in the lead in the key battleground state of Florida, which Trump ultimately won. Why are the opinion polls off?
It could very well be that in the pandemic, a lot of these assumptions that are being made about how to target subjects for a survey and then how to reweight the data statistically may well have been systematically wrong.
While the Biden campaign focused on Trump's handling of the pandemic, the close race shows Democrats may have misjudged the importance of the other issues that led voters to support Trump.
They feel left out. They feel as if, they and their families have missed out on opportunities. And I think that's the sort of discontent that Trump has really successfully seized upon. And I don't think that's changed since 2016. In fact, it may have gotten worse.
Tracy Hinson from Biden's home state of Delaware voted for Trump.
I didn't see a lot of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. I just didn't.
Biden supporter Beth Jobson says she wants change away from the divisiveness of the last 4 years.
I'm praying for healing with our country, that we can come together and sit down and have a conversation where all sides are heard.
The next president will have to face the ongoing pandemic and its economic fallout while trying to lead a divided country. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
WION VOA co-production, US Election 2020. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services, transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra, life's wonderful moments, styled by Myntra. driven by Ford. Presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus. Isko laga dala to full family jingalala.
And so as every week we have it, Voice of America's Nova Purwadi joins us live from Washington, D.C. at this hour. Nova, a very good evening to you. Now the race is nearing the finishing line, or so it seems. Interestingly, your last week's prediction was right, that no clear winner was expected to be projected around election night. Where are we today in the Electoral College tally, and how long will election hang in balance?
Well, Akansha, I did see you bring up the Electoral College Map, and the focus these days is, of course, in 5 key states that are still counting their votes and have yet to be called or projected. Now, as we mentioned in our previous reports, many in the Democratic side were expecting a blue wave, such as they experienced in 2018 during the midterm elections, when they swept back to control the House of Representatives. And that's why I said at the time in our last meeting that we could know the direction, at least, of the elections by midnight Washington, D.C. time, which is around 9:30 a.m. On Wednesday, India time, New Delhi time. But that would have been the case if there had been a blue wave, if Florida and also Texas would suddenly go into the blue Democratic column. But of course, that didn't happen. And as one prominent analyst put it, on the day of the election, on the morning of the election, this could either turn out to be a blowout or a nail biter. Of course, it turned out to be the latter, because with those states going into the red column, we had to wait now for several other smaller, less populated states, and also states that take a little bit longer to count their votes and certify everything. And so we have states, basically all eyes are on Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Arizona. VOA hasn't called Arizona as of Thursday night, unlike several other news agencies, and also Nevada. We're keeping an eye out on those. And Alaska usually takes a while, only 3 electoral college votes, not that much attention there. Right. But what's been interesting is one of the last states called by VOA is Maine, which splits its vote, right. And it's only 4, but it splits its votes, and so 3 go to Biden and 1 went to Donald Trump, Akansha.
Absolutely. Let's also talk about Georgia and Pennsylvania. These are 2 states which flipped in the last half. Were there any surprises when it comes to vote numbers, or even certain states claiming victory? Which were the surprising states, especially the swing states?
Well, on election night, there were few surprises because Florida ended up going red again, and Texas ended up staying red. Texas is, of course, a Republican Party stronghold. And we didn't really see many surprises in election night. But the surprises started coming on Wednesday, when Wisconsin and also Michigan were called or projected for Joe Biden. These are 2 states which are usually Democratic leaning, but in 2016 ended up swinging to Donald Trump, to the Republican Party. And so instead of a blue wave, as some supporters of Joe Biden had anticipated or expected, we got a blue wall of Wisconsin and Michigan, and also Pennsylvania is also Joe Biden's home state, or rather his the state where he was born, is also in that blue wall sort of path for Joe Biden to 270 electoral college votes. Now, Georgia is a surprise because most Americans here woke up on Friday morning, local time, to see that the lead has flipped, and former Vice President Biden now leads there, albeit by a fraction of votes. And that is quite surprising because never since 1992 had Georgia supported a Democratic candidate.
Right.
A lot of people credit a few people for this. The late congressman and civil rights activist John Lewis, who recently passed away, he was credited in this. And also Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor in 2018 and was defeated amidst allegations of voter suppression by the governor, who is now the governor. And she's been very active in campaigning against voter suppression, in promoting voter registration. And so she's being credited at least for this flip, if it maintains the lead, in a state like Georgia, Akansha.
Right. Also, Nova, Donald Trump's campaign team has filed lawsuits in the states of Nevada, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and even Michigan. What is the status of these lawsuits and what is going to be the outcome now?
Well, it's interesting. There are lots and lots of lawsuits, and every day we seem to see new lawsuits, and they can be divided into two. One is disputing the results of the count, especially when it's the margins are very thin, and two is to stop counting. A lot of the lawsuits that are filed to stop counting have been thrown out. I think you mentioned in Georgia and in several other states, because basically the reason the U.S. election is sometimes so difficult to explain is it's not a national system as it is in many countries. It's a state by state, and so each state has their own regulations, their own laws in relation to elections. And that is why we are seeing such different ways of handling ballots. Florida started counting, tabulating its ballots, even early mail-in ballots as they came in. Whereas Pennsylvania, as we've discussed thoroughly, still takes more time because they only count the mail-in ballots on election day on November 3rd. And the extra complexity of mail-in ballots are things like the signature on the ballot has to match exactly the records that the state has. And so with a lot of these lawsuits to stop the count, they've been thrown out. But on the lawsuits that will dispute results, they of course have to wait till the results are certified, which could take next week at least. And then those lawsuits would have to be filed. And sometimes they have to be filed at the cost of the complaint of the campaign. And will they have enough money to finance that kind of recount? And also historically, recounts don't really result in a different result, or not significantly different enough to sway the votes. But as we see in Georgia, as of this morning, it was only 1,000 votes separating the two. So with that one, I'm sure the litigation is coming furiously. And perhaps being filed maybe sometime next week, if not earlier.
Right. It's interesting to see how you've broken down that dichotomy between those lawsuits. And of course, going by what you're saying, it seems that we'll have to wait for the results and to find out the validity of these lawsuits, which are questioning the integrity of the results. I'm going to request you, Nova, to hang in there as I'll come back to you to discuss a whole plethora of more issues that are waiting on U.S. election itself. For now, let's quickly take our viewers through what social media companies are doing to curb misinformation. Now, social media companies have made a lot of changes ahead of the US election to stop the spread of misinformation. Has it been enough? VOA's Michelle Quinn reports.
As Americans await the outcome of Tuesday's national elections, Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other internet firms will be busy doing something else, monitoring their sites and deciding which posts to allow and when to stop the spread of misinformation.
we've clearly entered an age where you can't believe what you read, see, or hear online. The online information ecosystem is a dumpster fire. Let's be honest with each other.
At issue, will internet sites be conduits of misinformation about voting, election results, and post-election turmoil? And what actions might malicious content spark?
That's the real fear, is that there'll be some sort of misinformation, cobbled together with calls for some type of action, or that people may take that as a call to action, whether or not it even includes an explicit one. And I think that's the real fear right now, is that there'll be some sort of civic unrest.
Twitter has started labeling some factually questionable tweets about election issues and pointed users to credible information. The company says it will flag tweets if candidates prematurely claim victory. Facebook said it could turn to so-called break glass options. That could mean taking steps the firm reportedly has used in other parts of the world, like Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Deactivating hashtags related to false information about election results, suppressing viral posts that spread messages of violence or fake news. The problem with online misinformation is that it can spread widely before internet sites, which are also sensitive to claims they are suppressing certain viewpoints, decide to act.
I worry if they'll break the glass as quick as it might need to be done, depending on sort of what is happening in our post-election period.
While U.S. voters chart the future course of the nation, election 2020 is another test case of whether social media helps or hurts the democratic process. Michelle Quinn, VOA News, San Francisco.
Let's now talk more about the elections. Let's go back to Voice of America's Nova Parvati, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Nova, Twitter and Facebook this time around have played a more proactive role if we were to compare their role vis-a-vis 2016's U.S. election. How proactive have they been this time around, and what sort of initiatives have they taken?
Well, it's interesting, Akansha, on election night, or rather early Wednesday morning after the election, they already started when President Trump claimed that he had won. A prompt or a warning or a flag came up on Twitter and Facebook. And the same thing happened the day after, when President Trump didn't make any media appearances, but he certainly tweeted a lot on Wednesday. And a lot of his tweets were similarly flagged. Same thing happened when President Trump asserted that he'd won again based on the votes that were counted on Tuesday night, in his press conference on Thursday night, Washington, D.C. time. But any tweet to that effect was also flagged. During that press conference, President Trump claimed that his viewpoints were being censored and his victory were being suppressed also by big tech. He accused big tech of taking sides in this election. Now, that has been a long allegation, an allegation that's been long made, that these flags or fact checks or attempts to dispel misinformation are actually attempts to censure. And that's a fine line that Facebook and Twitter and other social media companies have to tread. But certainly they are not, they put misinformation on social media, Kansha.
Right. As far as outside influences are concerned, issue of national security seem to have, of course, occupied an important place even during this election. Having said that, what issues have dominated this election, be it racism, immigration, of course, national security, as I mentioned, even the issue of the pandemic's handling? What issues have motivated the US voter to go and cast their vote, that too at the time of a pandemic in a country with the highest number of infections?
Well, Akansha, it seems to not have budged from surveys before the elections, some exit polls held. The economy was very important. The issues of racial justice and also law and order were issues that were important. And also the coronavirus pandemic and also healthcare were important. And these issues seem not to have budged from their polling numbers before the election. Now, what's interesting is basically Joe Biden campaigned primarily, if not solely, on the pandemic response, but this wasn't enough to gain support from some who were maybe independent or Republican leaning, who still viewed the economy as a more overarching important issue. Now, in terms of foreign policy and security, what's interesting is polling has indicated that terrorism, which used to be viewed as the number one threat, and so voters were looking for a president who was tough on terrorism. Now it's sort of shifted, and polling indicates that the pandemic or pandemics are something that the president should keep Americans safe from. This kind of flipped from similar polls in March, which showed terrorism still being the main threat to America. Now the pandemics are considered a threat. Whereas China, only 1 in 5 people in a recent poll said that China or security threats from outside factored into their voting account.
Absolutely, Nova, and I'm quickly running out of time, so I'll just quickly take my last question from you. There's been a spike in firearms sales. Of course, also at the same time, there's been a shortage in ammunition. Fear and anxiety has been running high. Shops are boarding up. They boarded up already before the election took place. Protests have been taking place. Is this election by far the most divisive and polarized election in the history of US politics?
It could be, at least since the modern era, or since I've been covering elections stateside since 2008. I've never seen shops and businesses being boarded up before election results are announced. But certainly this has been a tense year, and a lot of businesses have been boarded up since summer, since June, when the Black Lives Matter wave of protests started in the US. So there's also that factor, and where businesses know that any spike in tension could lead to violence. It has been the most tense, but it has been the most interesting as well in terms of, if I can go back to the litigation, one case in Pennsylvania was basically the Trump camp wanted to get a little closer. Their monitors wanted to get closer, 6 feet to the ballots, the observers. Whereas the court had, whereas the local government had initially mandated 10 feet because of COVID. And in that case, I think they allowed them to get a little closer. And this is how minute a lot of these polarization
the nitty-gritties have been.
But of course, a lot of...
And that actually brings me to...
So we'll figure out, hopefully in the next couple of days or weeks until we find out.
Next couple of days, or...
basically have a finality to all of this.
Next couple of days or weeks. Wow, that's a lot of time to wait for. Having said that, let the best man win. Thank you so much, Nova, for joining us on this newscast, and as every week bringing us all the latest on US election. And with that, it's a wrap of this newscast. Thank you so much for watching. Stay with WION for all the latest on US election.
WION VOA co-production, US Election 2020. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services, transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra, life's wonderful moments, styled by Myntra. Driven by Ford, presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus, Isko Laga Dala to Full Family Jingalala. US Election 2020. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services. Transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra. Life's wonderful moments. Styled by Myntra. Driven by Ford. Presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus. Isko laga dala to full family jingalala. Hello and welcome to the US election special broadcast right here on WION with me, Alison LaGrange. Now we start this evening show with the latest coming in. Donald Trump has reached the brink of defeat, still lagging in Arizona and Nevada, and with Joe Biden steadily gaining on him in Pennsylvania and Georgia. Trump's lawsuits are making little headway, and nor are his conspiracy theories stopping the counting of the votes. Now, Biden is hovering within striking distance of the 270 electoral votes and thus the presidency. Let's break it down one by one. Now, Trump's very narrow path to a second term has nearly vanished in the 3 days after the election, and it looks like the race could be called any time now. Now, in Georgia, the Democratic hopeful Joe Biden has taken a dramatic lead. With 99% of the state vote count reported, Trump's chances at securing Georgia at this point looks grim. Looking at another keystone battleground state, Pennsylvania, the former vice president is leading over President Trump by a little less than 4,000 votes. Now, tens of thousands of votes, most of them from strongly Democratic areas, including around Philadelphia, remain to be counted. A blue Pennsylvania is highly likely too. Nevada, the state with 6 electoral votes, remains tilted towards the left, with 84% of the vote count done. With the movement rapidly going Biden's way, Trump's hope for a second term is rapidly evaporating. With Georgia set to declare their victor, it won't matter what happens in Arizona, Pennsylvania or Nevada. But again, it is looking good for Biden in those states too. Now, starting from individual states to news outlets and the members of the Republican Party, the world around Donald Trump has acknowledged the chances of Trump winning are now diminishing, but that reality hasn't appeared to have set in for the candidate himself. The president has staged a corrosive and potentially dangerous attempt at undermining the U.S. election, now basically claiming the presidency was being stolen from him as vote counts showed his path to victory disappearing, using the briefing room to espouse baseless claims that he is being deprived of a second term by fraud. Trump thrust into question the democratic notion of a peaceful transition of power should Biden win, and instead he suggested that he would fight in the courts until the election is decided in his favor.
The voting apparatus of those states are run in all cases by Democrats. We were winning in all the key locations by a lot, actually. And this is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election, and we can't let that happen.
The spectacle, though, foreshadowed by the president for months, was nevertheless a sign of Trump's unwillingness to cede the White House without a prolonged battle. Now, this has led to, might I say, been leading to unrest and violence on the streets. Now take a look at the latest skirmish from across the nation.
Incredible times, and I hear we're doing very well in Florida. We're doing very well. Stop the trees! Stop the trees! Stop the trees! Stop the trees!
And these dummies are out here trying to run. USA!
We're not going to take it anymore.
Put your hands in the air for the MAGA dance.
It's watching.
Can't stop the revolution.
Control.
The election very easily.
Now we're being joined live on this broadcast by Susan Tehrani, coming to us live from New York, and Simon Marks joining us from Washington, D.C. for all the latest on the action. Now, Simon, I will start with you. This has been the closest election, a real nail-biter. We were almost expecting a late surge of blue ballots, considering Joe Biden was such a proponent of mail-in ballots while Trump was not, and they do take longer to count. We have seen a few key battlegrounds that have emerged, and Joe Biden is pulling ahead. Take us through some of the most significant ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that the stage is now set here for Joe Biden imminently to be declared officially the president-elect, at least officially as far as the television networks, the Associated Press and the other news organizations are concerned that crunch all of the numbers as they come in. And we've seen a significant turnaround over the course of the last few minutes, with Joe Biden moving into the lead in Pennsylvania as the final postal votes there are counted. He now enjoys a lead of around 5,500 votes. That number's going to grow. There are still 2% of the votes in Pennsylvania being processed. In Georgia, Joe Biden enjoys a lead of just around 1,000 votes, with 99% of the election votes counted. That's a wafer-thin margin. Obviously, it might give President Donald Trump the possibility of demanding a recount in Georgia. In Nevada, Joe Biden's advantage has grown to around 11,000 votes after 84% of the votes have been counted. And that gives you a sense of the very close nature of the outcome of this election as we head to what could be a declaration that Joe Biden is the president-elect. But the Trump campaign has, while I came on the air, put a statement out that reads, "This election is not over. The false projection of Joe Biden as the winner," and there hasn't actually been a projection yet, but the false projection of Joe Biden as the winner is based on results from 4 states that are far from final. Georgia is headed for a recount, so that is the first confirmation we've had that President Trump's going to go for a recount in Georgia. We are confident we will find ballots improperly harvested and President Trump will ultimately prevail. The statement, and I'm reading this for the first time as I read it to you, goes on to say there were many irregularities in Pennsylvania. It says in Nevada, there appear to be thousands of individuals who improperly cast ballots by post. Finally, the statement goes on to say the president is on course to win Arizona outright. And in phrases that look to me like they've been dictated by the president, it specifically slams Fox News and the Associated Press for projecting that Joe Biden had won in Arizona. Biden is relying on these states for his phony claim on the White House, says the general counsel to the Trump campaign, Matt Morgan. Once the election is final, President Trump will be re-elected. So a statement from the Trump campaign, again indicating the president has no intention of conceding, is going to continue challenging this legally. But again, a statement that provides absolutely no specifics to back up the claims of voter fraud that the Trump campaign now continues to make, even as we are on the cusp of Joe Biden formally being projected the winner of this election.
Right, Simon, and you have mentioned there that he has now moved for a recount. This was one of the options that was available to Trump. He has also moved to the courts to question the validity. He's been using very strong language, words like fraud, people stealing the election. These are very strong statements. And I mean, if it does go to the courts, if these results are disputed, explain the legalities. This is not exactly how it would work.
Well, at the moment, he doesn't seem to have a legal case. I mean, every single court that he's been into, apart from one in Pennsylvania, that on a very technical issue, the amount of space that needed to exist between vote count observers and bits of furniture in the room, that case, the Trump campaign won, but every other case has been thrown out of court. And in Georgia, where, by the way, the election is not run by Democrats, it's run by Republicans who control the state of Georgia, a judge there threw a lawsuit out yesterday after the lawyer for the Trump campaign was unable to cite any evidence whatsoever to support the claims that the Trump campaign was making in court that postal ballots were being illegally processed by the state. So, you know, the language can be as emotive as President Trump wants to make it, but the reality is his lawyers, if they're going to carry on fighting this in court, need hard and fast evidence of the kind of widespread voter fraud they would need to prove in order to undo some of these results. And, you know, the president talks about going to the Supreme Court. There's not a single case in play right now that has a prayer of getting to the Supreme Court. So they've either got to come up with the goods and prove that there's been voter fraud as they claim and that the election is being stolen as they claim, or Republican grandees are going to have a very tough decision to make, and that is how much more rope do they give President Trump to lead America to the edge of a constitutional crisis?
Right, Simon. And as we speak, protests are going on in different parts of the country. This has been a very divisive election that followed a very divisive campaign. This election has shown very much a divided America.
Yeah, without question. I mean, you just look at the numbers. This is a country that is completely polarized. Joe Biden has won more votes than anyone has ever won for the presidency, north of 70 million. But Donald Trump has won more votes in his quest to be re-elected than Barack Obama ever won in his successful quests for the presidency. Donald Trump controls the support, or is at the top of the tree of support for nearly 70 million Americans. And look, the Democrats never expected to be in this position this Friday. They thought by now Joe Biden would be in a position to start making cabinet appointments. This was supposed to be a Democrat landslide, a clean sweep. They weren't just going to win the presidency, they were going to win control of the Senate, expand their majority in the House of Representatives. None of that has come to pass. The only bit that might come to fruition is Joe Biden securing the keys of the Oval Office. It's still very unclear that the Democrats are even going to get to a 50-50 tie in the US Senate. And Donald Trump, even if he concedes, even if he leaves the White House, he's going to leave the White House with the support of a substantial number of those nearly 70 million Americans who supported him. Some of them will conclude that his antics this week are the point at which they get off the Trump train, but a lot of them will stay with him. And that makes him an incredibly potent force in American politics, not just for the next few weeks, but going forward into 2021 and beyond, even after he leaves the White House.
Absolutely, Simon. Thank you very much for bringing us all the latest there. That's Simon Marks joining us from Washington, D.C. with the latest statement coming from the Trump camp on the recount due to be held. Now, even the warmest venue for the president, Fox and Friends, have sounded their doubts about his talk of a stolen election. Nearly a decade ago, Donald J. Trump had a regular Monday slot on the Fox News morning show, Fox and Friends, and it has been a reliably friendly venue for him throughout his presidency. But more recently, the show has been cool to his unsubstantiated claims of widespread vote fraud. Now, the co-host, Steve Doocy, has challenged Pam Bondi, a former Attorney General of Florida and a Trump supporter, over her comment about fake ballots that are coming in late. Take a look.
The good residents who are all supporting us in Pennsylvania, their votes don't count by these fake ballots that are coming in late.
What,
and back
Pam?
to the observation, they're not letting us watch the process.
Pam, did you just say fake ballots?
There could be. That's the problem. If they're letting,
Do you
we
have
don't
any,
know, Steve.
Do you have you heard stories of, ballots that are fake? And if so, just tell us what you know.
Now, after Trump's appearance at the White House, it was unclear whether Republicans would remain at his side. And this frustration was echoed by his two adult sons, Eric and Donald Trump Jr. They expressed anger over the Republicans not backing the president in his battle to halt the vote counting. I quote here, "Where is the GOP? Our voters will never forget," wrote Eric Trump. Now, his older brother, Donald Trump Jr., accused 2024 GOP hopefuls of remaining silent in the effort. Now, the Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, has tweeted, and I quote, "There is no defense for the president's comments tonight undermining our democratic process. America is counting the votes, and we must respect the results as we always have before. No election or person is more important than our democracy." But others have remained steadfast, including Vice President Mike Pence, who has not been heard from since Trump falsely claimed victory on election night. Now, Trump has remained intent on waging a prolonged fight, viewing it as his only option. Now, Susan Tehrani is still with us live from New York for the latest on this. Now, Susan, you heard the statement there by Simon on the latest coming out of the Trump camp that they will be going for a recount. What is the latest that you have?
That's right. They're adamant. They want a recount. Some states have automatic recounts, for example, like Arizona. However, there are some states like Georgia that don't. And the reason these states have automatic recounts like Arizona and Pennsylvania is because, and only if there is a very small margin between the two candidates, then they will consider a recount. But calling for a recount at this point in time, when we don't have all of the votes coming in, all of the vote counts being counted, and vote sites basically putting a stamp on votes being completely concluded and the counting being concluded, it's pretty premature to say whether we expect a recount or not. Donald Trump last night made very unsubstantiated claims about voter fraud. That was a turning point for many of his supporters who were standing by him, standing by his side, until now hoping that something would come out of this election frenzy, if you may. And while he will enjoy the support of his base, and Trumpism, by the way, is not dead after Trump leaves the White House, and if he does, it will be very potent across the United States. As Simon mentioned, you already have 70 million Americans who voted for him, despite the fact that he didn't really have the backing of the polls, the media, or Hollywood, or the so-called elite. He had the backing of the people. And those people will continue to be his base. But just to go back to what happened last night and the claims that he made without evidence, that sort of brought a lot of Republicans to sort of shake their heads and think twice of where this is all going and whether or not this is about Donald Trump and his victory, or is it about the democratic process in the United States. And it's a very dangerous and slippery slope of a path to go through when you undermine one of the main pillars of democracy here in the United States, the right to vote, and the precedent that it will set for future elections to come. So if there is any evidence, Americans want to see it, but if it's unsubstantiated, like the claims that Donald Trump made last night, it's not exactly the best path for his campaign to go down at this point.
Right, absolutely. This was not a landslide victory by any means. It was this election had been considered to be a referendum of sorts on Trump's presidency, and now we see that the fact that there has been heavy criticism of his handling of the pandemic as an example, but almost half of the Americans want him to stay.
Yeah, a lot of Americans want him to stay. And you talk about referendum on Trump's presidency. This election was also a referendum on the progressive agenda of a Democratic Party in Washington, in the House, moving to the left. People like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and her allies, which were really pushing the Bernie Sanders camp, which was really pushing for a Green New Deal, more progressive policies, defunding the police. This was sort of a referendum on that as well, because we saw that the Democrats did not only not have a landslide and a blue wave in the presidential election, we also didn't see a landslide in Congress, which it will be most probably dominated by the Democrats, but they lost a lot of seats. A lot of Republicans went in there, and with the Republicans holding on to the Senate, after all, you know what they say, that is where law is made. That is where the rule of the land is decided at the end of the day. In Congress, in Senate, and, you know, Joe Biden may become president, but the American people also made very clear that they don't want this landslide progressiveness that they were hoping to achieve.
Susan, thank you as always for bringing us all the latest coming out of New York on the U.S. elections. Now, the vote counts on, but we appear to be closer to a winner. So when will we know the results? This will probably vary significantly from state to state. Let's take them one at a time. Now, Alaska may well be the last state to be called. That being said, it is a red state and it isn't really competitive. So Mr. Trump will probably win here pretty easily. 95% of the estimated votes have been counted in North Carolina, but this swing state will accept mail-in ballots that arrive through to November the 12th, and it is possible that the race won't be called until then. Now, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden has been steadily making up grounds thanks to the newly counted votes in major metropolitan areas of the state, mostly Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. The vote tally is being continually updated with 97% of the vote count over. The state might call a winner by the weekend. Moving on to Nevada, the race is much closer than experts expected, but the state will accept mail-in ballots received through to the 10th of November, now as long as they were postmarked by the election day. Thus, a statewide result will only be announced after the 10th of November. Now, the major focus of all media outlets right now is Georgia. The race could end up close enough for a recount. Election officials in Georgia were counting the votes into the early hours of Friday, and the state might have been called a winner already if not for a burst pipe which delayed the counting process in and around Atlanta. Now, with 99% of the vote count done and Biden leading with less than 1,000 votes, Georgia might call a winner any time now, and the winner, if Biden, will potentially end the contest of this year's presidential elections. While the outcome of this election remains uncertain, it seems all too clear that many more people around America are contracting the coronavirus. The surge in cases in the U.S. this fall has topped their worst case assumptions. Now, more than 121,000 cases have been reported in just 24 hours, more new cases than on any other day of the pandemic. New infections are climbing steadily higher in 43 states. In a single day across America, the coronavirus has churned through homes, workplaces, hospitals, schools, and laboratories. From dawn until nightfall, this has been the worst day of the pandemic in terms of new cases. Governors are doing what is now a familiar routine, pleading in front of news cameras for Americans to do their part to stop the spread of the coronavirus. And the potential President Joe Biden is addressing the never-ending crisis.
Senator Harris and I just completed briefings on both COVID and the economic crisis facing this nation. And we're reminded again of the severity of this pandemic. Cases are on the rise nationwide, and we're nearing 240,000 deaths due to COVID. And our hearts go out to each and every family that has lost a loved one to this terrible disease.
Now, this is the reality across America, where laboratories once overlooked in the back rooms of hospitals have become front and center in the country's pandemic response as they race to keep up with testing demand. As America counts votes, the numbers of cases of people and in the hospitals and the deaths due to COVID-19 grows. Elections have consequences, but they are taking time. Meanwhile, the virus is marching on. And that's a wrap on this US special broadcast. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to WION World as One for all your global news and updates right here on WION.
US Election 2020. New York Direct. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services. Transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra. Life's wonderful moments. Styled by Myntra. Driven by Ford. Presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus. Isko laga dala to full family jingalala.
and welcome to a new episode of the West Asia Post with me, Hadi Francis. Our weekly show where we bring you your weekly dose of stories coming out of the most volatile region in the world. Backlash against France is growing. People of West Asian nations have descended to the streets. Boycott French goods is a hashtag that is trending. The French President Emmanuel Macron have been called in the protests a devil. But West Asia is no stranger to the radical terrorism that is happening in Europe now. And this is what we're going to show you in exclusive reporting later on in this episode. But first, let's take a look at the protests and the outrage that is raging in West Asia. The backlash against France is only growing. Protests against Macron have entered their second week. People across West Asian nations have descended on the streets.
We are protesting against what the French President Emmanuel Macron did, and even the teacher Patti who offended Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad is our idol until after this earthly life.
They are calling the French president a devil.
We are here today because the French president has insulted our great prophet. And we are here to tell Macron that we respect all religions, like Christianity. Macron has no right to insult our prophet.
The call for boycotting French goods grows louder.
You must take a united stand to boycott French goods because the economy hurts them more than anything else. So you should stand with your responsibilities.
While Macron aimed at clearing all misunderstandings with a recent interview to an Arabic broadcaster, it led to a new series of protests across the Arab world. While many attacked the French president for not apologizing for his comments, others looked at the interview as a success of the protest and boycott campaigns. Either way, it looks like the protests are likely to continue, with anger growing on the streets of West Asia. This terrorism that is hitting Europe these days was the story of the lives of the people of West Asia for years, especially in Syria and Iraq. Next, we take you to the grounds of Syria to witness painful destruction and to see them face to face, those people who do the beheading. Exclusive reporting from the grounds of Syria. We see together. People of Syria and Iraq do not find it surprising to see Europe being hit by incidents of brutal violence and radical terrorism. This is something that, for a decade now, has been the story of their lives for people in those two countries, along with others in West Asia. In this report, WION takes you to the ground of the most painful happenings in West Asia. This is Syria. This village in Latakia was fully evacuated one night in 2013 when a terrorist armed group entered, killed each and every man, and kidnapped each and every woman and child. Some of whom were exchanged later in a prisoner swap between the Syrian forces and Al-Nusra Islamic armed opposition. These streets in Homs were the Christian streets, where similar terrorism was witnessed. The churches, as we see here, have witnessed violence and massacres of all kinds. Women were raped. Crosses were used to stab hearts. You name it, it happened in this war. From Homs to Aleppo. This is me in Veil, undercover in ISIS area, with the sound of threats and sniper that you can hear. People walked to buy bread and gas during the siege. This is how civilians used to cross what they called the Bridge of Death. For years, bodies of massacred people floated back to their families in the river separating the ISIS-ruled area from the Syrian army-controlled territory. In the course of many investigative trips around armed groups of the Syrian Free Army, I found this 20-year-old killer. He was popular in Syria. He is Ammar Balouch, a university student who killed his colleague in a classroom inside the University of Damascus for political reasons. After the crime, he fled back to the groups that use men like him. In this room, 4 people tell me that they have committed beheading in their fights against the Syrian army. And when I even ask them why, they say it is less costly than guns and bullets. From these incidents of conflict and violence and the war that has been going on for years, I learned a lot by doing interviews and watching the scenes of war. التي تظهر من هذا الثقب في ثقب القنص هناك المسلحون المعارضون. I learned how radicals brainwash young men, how hate crimes are used in political wars, how these people have become the fodder in a war fueled by the economic feud over actual oil and gas. It is scary. It is uncontrollable. And the worst part is that these people don't know that they're doing a bad thing. There's always a superior behind or above them, convincing these boys that they are serving Allah. In West Asia, even after the defeat of ISIS, it is always a possibility that a certain intelligence group deployed by a certain organization or country will push for a bloody battle. In West Asia, these crimes have become normalized. Sometimes the killers are protected for political reasons. A little more than a month ago, 3 men were killed in Kaftoun village, northern Lebanon. And the ISIS members who committed the crime were former prisoners who had been freed by politicians. In this part of the world, people can feel the pain of Europe because they know this demon and they have been fighting it firsthand for years. We will continue to bring you the latest updates and exclusive reporting from the heart of that conflict. But now, as usual, let's take a look at what's making headlines across West Asia.
In an effort to make its labor market more attractive for foreign workers, Saudi Arabia is now planning to reform its decades-old controversial kafala system to ease restrictions on foreign workers. According to U.S. media reports, the United States is planning to sanction Gibran Basil, the leader of Lebanon's Free Patriotic Movement Party. The party was founded by President Michel Aoun and is allied with Hezbollah. Israel's army has demolished the homes of nearly 80 Palestinian Bedouins in the occupied West Bank. This comes as a rare operation targeting an entire community with bulldozers razing the whole village. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said that the US presidential election's results will not impact Tehran's policy towards Washington. In a televised address, Khamenei reiterated that the country's policy is set and does not change without whoever comes and goes. Saudi Arabia will host a Formula One Grand Prix for the first time next year, with a night race on the streets of Jeddah. The move comes amid widespread backlash from human rights groups who accuse the kingdom of using sports to create a positive image.
Palestinian olive farmers in the occupied West Bank are facing a tough situation. Lack of rain and Israeli settler attacks continue to hinder a vital harvest. Farmers are expecting a drop of around 4,000 tons of pressed olive oil. Our next report brings you more.
For Israelis and Palestinians, everything is politicized, even the olive harvest. Early morning, a handful of farmers' families gather for the chance to get to their land. For a few minutes, Israeli soldiers open the gates. ID papers are checked, and they go from one side of the wall to the other part after being permitted into Israeli-controlled land. Olive oil from the West Bank is perhaps the most political food in the world. They work fast. Beating the branches isn't good for trees, but it's quick, which helps when you have 2 weeks of work in hand to finish in a couple of days. Each family has just a few days to not only harvest their olives, but also to carry out maintenance work that would normally be done throughout the year. The trees don't get the trimming or fertilization they need. The land doesn't get plowed or maintained, so the production goes down. The restrictions on access to the land results in a separation barrier and a military road that cordons off the nearby illegal settlements of Burqa village. The Palestinian Agriculture Ministry says that of the 11 million olive trees, 500,000 have been cut off in coordination with the Israeli ministry. A recent UN report says that the trees in the Israeli settlements were 65% less productive than those that are regularly attended. Just a few kilometers away from Ramallah, near Burqa village, another group of Palestinian farmers was confronted by Israeli settlers. 3 were injured earlier this month by an Israeli outpost in the same area. Settlers attacked the Palestinian farmers and damaged their olive trees. Back in the south, we found Adam Barakat and Mahmoud Rebhi. They say they get 2 days access to get 2 weeks worth of work in February and 17 days now in harvest time.
They have control over it at all the time. They always stay here. They set up tents and forbid anyone from approaching the land. The same thing happens every year. We bring the army with us, considering that this is a close military point. However, we face the same problem.
Palestinian farmers get a quarter of their income from olives, but it's about more than money. The trees are the most powerful symbol of Palestinian attachment to the land.
We came in the morning to harvest olives and we found that the settlers had arrived before us. There were about 100 settlers. They started hurling stones at us and attacked cars and women. There are people who were injured. This is our land. We can't abandon it. We must remain here. Those olives belong to us.
10 hours after they first opened, the gates and borders are unlocked once again for the farmers to leave Israeli settlements. The farmers expect another week or so of this restricted harvest season. The proximity to Jewish settlements creates problems for Palestinian farmers trying to reach their olive trees, not only during the harvest, but throughout the year. West Asia Bureau, WION. The world is one.
A massive earthquake ripped through parts of Turkey and Greece on October 30th. The death toll continues to rise in the Turkish city of Izmir, which remains the worst hit. Over 1,000 reported injuries. This was the deadliest earthquake to hit Turkey for a decade. Our next report tells you more.
More than 115 people have already lost their lives. The recent earthquake in Turkey has devastated the city of Izmir. Tremors could be felt several hundred kilometers away, as far as Athens and Istanbul. There were images of buildings shaking violently. City people were seen running on the streets. There was widespread panic throughout. Countless people have been rendered homeless by the quake in Turkey's third largest city. Many of them are now sleeping outside or in temporary tents.
We were at the dentist with my husband. The tremble came as his tooth was being done. I'm 8 months pregnant. My husband pushed me under the table to protect me. He was still sitting on the dental examination chair at that time. And then the tremor intensified. I panicked because I'm pregnant. My husband pushed the door, but it didn't move. So I rushed to the balcony.
Emergency relief teams worked in the freezing cold to try and rescue people still feared trapped in the debris of collapsed buildings. Days after the earthquake struck Izmir, search and rescue crews are finding more bodies than survivors in the rubble. The worst hit is the Turkish town of Bayrakli in Izmir, where there was a mixture of celebration and sadness after a 3-year-old girl named Elif Perinsek was rescued from the rubble. But the girl lost a sibling to the disaster, which struck on October 30th in the Aegean Sea. The quake epicenter was north of the Greek island of Samos. The US Geological Survey has put it at a magnitude of 7.0. The region is very prone to powerful earthquakes, as is the rest of Turkey. Turkey has a record of earthquakes, but do people generally know how to react? Turkey has reported over 1,464 aftershocks following the quake, including 44 that were above 4 in magnitude. In the 1990s, just outside Istanbul, 20,000 people were killed in the late 1990s just outside Istanbul when a devastating quake hit the city of Izmit. These powerful quakes causing thousands of casualties is not new in Turkey. Living in Turkey means living with the threat of earthquakes. It is also a reminder of the constant threat of an earthquake for the people of Istanbul. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Dubbed by the Manhattan of the desert, for its centuries-old skyscrapers, Yemen's city of Shibam escaped damage in the civil war, but now faces collapse due to neglect, rains and floods. We take a look.
Looking like America's Grand Canyon, the UNESCO-listed World Heritage Site is strategically built on a rocky spur high above a river valley in Yemen. Some of the hundreds of fantastical sun-dried mud brick towers soar 7 stories high. Many dating back to the 16th century, all crammed inside a traditional fortified wall built for protection. Once an oasis stop for the camel caravans on the spice and incense routes across southern Arabia, the United Nations describes the city as one of the oldest and best examples of urban planning based on the principle of vertical construction. But Shibam is now struggling. The city is controlled by the internationally recognized government. While it has largely been spared of direct conflict, it has not escaped the effects of the war. The mud brick buildings need constant repair. But Yemen's struggling economy and an unending civil war has put a stop to public spending to repair and maintain structures. Yemen has been described as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, mired in conflict since 2014. The war in the West Asian country has killed over 100,000 people, leaving millions suffering from food and medical shortages. The city was put on the UNESCO Heritage List in 1982, but in 2015 it was also added to the list of World Heritage in danger, with approximately 40 buildings being restored at a cost of $194,000. But experts maintain while restorations are going ahead, they may not be going fast enough to save the heritage city. West Asia Bureau, WION. World is One.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay home and stay safe. I am Radi Francis, and you are watching WION. World is One.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life. Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Amstrad, get real, get Amstrad.
The American people.
Three days of counting later, America does not have a president yet. Speculation is rife, though. Last we checked, Secret Service was ramping up Biden's security. I'm not hinting at anything, and neither do I want to. The numbers speak for themselves. On Gravitas tonight, we will report developments as they come in. We will also look at the latest tally and answer the question the whole world has been asking. Why is it taking so long to count the vote? We will look at how American voters are reacting to the suspense and how the internet is cracking up over the delay in results. All this and much more coming up on the show tonight. Also, Joe Biden's statement on Prime Minister Modi the last time he was in office. It should give you an idea of what a Biden White House would mean for India. Let's start as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Austria's Interior Ministry has ordered the closure of radical mosques after Monday's deadly attack by a jihadist in Vienna, in which 4 people were killed. German police conduct searches in several German towns in connection with 4 suspects believed to have ties to the Vienna attacker. Austrian police has also detained 14 people in the wake of the shooting, the first major attack in the country for decades, and the first blamed on a jihadist. 4 members of the European Parliament have urged to consider sanctions on Pakistan for its participation in the Pulwama attack. In a strongly worded letter to President of European Commission, the members have condemned the brazen disclosure made by Pakistan Federal Minister in the country's National Assembly of carrying out the Pulwama terrorist attack in India more than a year ago. Brucellosis, a bacterial disease with flu-like symptoms, has infected more than 6,000 people in a single outbreak in northwestern China, usually caused by contact with animals. The outbreak in Lanzhou, the capital of Gansu province, was due to a leak at a vaccine plant. In the first high-level interaction since tensions over Nepal's new political map, Indian Army Chief General M.M. Narawane called on Nepal Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli and discussed bilateral relations. The meeting between General Narawane and Oli, who is also the Defense Minister of Nepal, took place at his official residence.
PLA is facing.
In an address at a virtual seminar, India's Chief of Defense Staff, General Bipin Rawat, has said that China's People's Liberation Army is facing unanticipated consequences for its misadventures in eastern Ladakh because of the firm and strong responses by the Indian armed forces. The 8th round of India-China military talks have taken place today in Chushul, at the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, in a bid to defuse the border tension. Indonesia has fallen to its first recession in 22 years as the coronavirus pandemic continues to take a toll. While agriculture is a major component of its economy, Indonesia relies heavily on tourism. Scores of people, including 50 in Guatemala, have died as the remnants of Hurricane Eta on Thursday unleashed floods and triggered landslides on its deadly march across Central America. Italian Serie AA leaders AC Milan have seen a 24-match and 8-month-long unbeaten streak ended with a 3-0 defeat to Lille in the Europa League. Turkish midfielder Yusuf Yazici netted a spectacular hat-trick for the French visitors as they went a point above Milan at the halfway point of the group stage. English clubs sailed through with Tottenham beating Ludogorets Razgrad 3-1, Arsenal taking out Molde 4-1 and Leicester thrashing Braga 4-0. Football great Diego Maradona has been sedated by doctors to help him cope with withdrawal symptoms. The 60-year-old continues to remain in hospital against his own wishes after undergoing a successful surgery for a blood clot in his brain earlier this week. Maradona's doctor did not specify what the 1986 World Cup winner was abstaining from, but he has had a history of battles against alcohol and drug addiction.
The news is that there is no news yet. Day 3 of counting, we still do not have a winner to report, but in all likelihood, it may be Joe Biden. As we said last night, it's just a matter of time. Reports say the Secret Service is ramping up Biden's security. They have sent a squad of agents to add to the security bubble around Joe Biden at the Wilmington Convention Center. The Wilmington-Newcastle Airport has been declared as the National Defense Airspace. A team of Secret Service agents reportedly have been on standby for Biden since last week. Some reporters on the ground have observed the changes already. Additional security assets were spotted in Biden's motorcade. These are consistent with the presidential entourage, any presidential entourage. Reports also say that they're equipped to handle a wide variety of threats. While this is not a full protective detail that a U.S. president is entitled to, this deployment moves closer in that direction. The Secret Service will have to wait for the result for a full deployment to be commissioned. As we said, counting is still underway. More than 139 million votes have been counted. That's more than 90% of the votes cast. But the race is still very close and the process has been slow. It gave a polling agency enough time to conduct their opinion poll. The question posed to Americans in this opinion poll was this: what will the result be? 52% of them said that Biden is winning. 20% said Trump is winning. 28% are unsure about the result. But Americans can be sure about something else. Donald Trump is in no mood to vacate the White House. He has refused to accept the outcome, which he obviously believes will be against him. Trump says he is being cheated out of a victory. He held a press conference to complain about his losses. Guess what happened? Major American networks cut out of his speech the moment Trump claimed voter fraud. They did not wait for him to finish the speech. He also went to court, but not much luck there either. Judges in Georgia and Michigan found no merit in Trump's claims. They tossed out the cases filed by him. Election officials, courts, and the media, all of them say that Donald Trump has no evidence of voter fraud. But Trump keeps pushing America towards a nightmare, a constitutional crisis even. It could drag on for weeks. Before we talk about that, a quick update of what the numbers say at the moment. The tally remains where we left it last night. 264 for Joe Biden, 214 for Donald Trump. 270 is the victory mark. Counting began more than 70 hours ago, 7-0. Neither candidate has managed to pass the 270 mark. Joe Biden is literally one step away from victory. He needs to win just one more state to get there. Donald Trump hasn't lost the election. It's just harder for him to get 270 now. He needs to win at least 4 states out of the 5 that are counting. And with every vote that is counted, Trump's second term seems to be slipping away from his hands. The contest is down to 5 states, as I said: Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. And it couldn't get closer than this. In Georgia, it's a neck-and-neck battle. Biden is marginally ahead. The lead is of just a little more than 1,000 votes. Georgia has 16 electoral votes, and I understand a news flash just came in that Georgia is recounting the votes. Nevada, razor-thin margins again. Biden is ahead, but the difference in votes is less than 1%. 6 electoral votes to win in this state. Just what Biden needs for a win now. Donald Trump has the lead in North Carolina, 15 electoral votes here. Pennsylvania, Trump has lost his lead overnight in the state. Biden is ahead just by 0.1%. It is very close. 20 votes are still up for grabs. And this state, of course, carries 20 votes. Finally, we have Arizona. Biden leads here too by almost 2% of the vote. Arizona has 11 electoral votes. So to sum it up, the contest is in 5 states. Biden is ahead in 4. He needs to win just 1. Trump is ahead in 1, and he needs to win at least 4. The votes, as I said, are still being counted, but a Biden victory now looks like just a matter of time. He will be the 46th president of the United States, it appears now. Trump will not accept that, so he called for a press briefing. His first one since election day. He claimed the Democrats are stealing the election from him. Trump said he has won, but the ballots have been compromised.
Good evening. I'd like to provide the American people with an update on our efforts to protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
On the other side, Joe Biden senses a win. He addressed the press and American citizens too. He did not claim a victory, but he said there is no doubt who the winner will be.
In America, the vote is sacred. It's how people of this nation express their will. And it is the will of the voters, no one, not anything else, that chooses the President of the United States of America. So, each ballot must be counted. And that's what we're going to see going through now. And that's how it should be. Democracy is sometimes messy. It sometimes requires a little patience as well. But that patience has been rewarded now for more than 240 years with a system of governance that's been the envy of the world.
The Trump camp continues to protest, and there is a risk that it could get violent. In Las Vegas, Trump supporters gathered outside a voting center.
USA! 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 USA!
A counting center in Arizona witnessed similar scenes. There were pro-Trump protests in Miami too. Reports say some of these Trump supporters in America were spotted with guns. This poses a major threat to the counting process in all. And those of you watching us here in India have been asking this one question. If Joe Biden wins, what does he bring for India? We say India should not be worried about the prospect of a Biden White House. And to explain why, let me take you back to 2014. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was visiting Washington, D.C. This was the year he got elected, 2014. Right after his resounding win in the general election in India, Barack Obama was still the president of the U.S. and Joe Biden was the vice president. And in that capacity, he hosted a luncheon for the Indian Prime Minister. John Kerry was the U.S. Secretary of State then. He was in attendance, as you can see in these pictures. Before this event, Biden had met Prime Minister Modi for a dinner just the night before, alongside Obama and Kerry. And both Biden and the Indian Prime Minister had several engagements during this trip. How did Joe Biden, then Vice President of America, describe his interactions with the new Prime Minister of India? Listen to him.
Mr. Prime Minister, you won the largest democratic exercise in history. With over 550 million Indians casting their votes earlier this year. You campaigned on some of the very goals we hope to achieve in this relationship. Greater investment in India's economy, a modernized defense sector, and inclusive growth for both of our people. Mr. Prime Minister, our conversations these past 2 days leave me with absolute confidence that we can cross the sea together. And we are encouraged, all of us who have been in contact with you these last couple days, with your sense of purpose, with your incredible energy, and with your commitment to this relationship.
Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Simon Marks. Hello again, Simon. I'm going to ask you the same question I've been asking for the past 2 days. What is happening and by when should we have a result?
Yeah, I think that question, we could just carry on asking that. Look, the result is imminent here. We now know, just within the last few minutes, as you were saying, Palki, in Georgia, they're going to begin a recount because a razor-thin margin separates Joe Biden from Donald Trump, just over 1,000 votes currently. But more broadly than that, Joe Biden in Georgia went into the lead, but he coursed into the lead also in the all-important battleground state of Pennsylvania. And that has led at least one television network here now to start describing Joe Biden as the president-elect. And we're seeing the institutions of government adjust as they normally would to the impending announcement that Joe Biden has won this election. So Secret Service protection for him and his family and for Kamala Harris has been stepped up over the last couple of hours. A no-fly zone has been declared over former Vice President Joe Biden's home in Delaware. Those are the trappings that always associate the beginning of the formal recognition here that Joe Biden has won the election. And that is going to create more questions for a White House that just within the last 90 minutes has again doubled down. The Trump campaign issuing a furious statement insisting the election is not over, describing the projection of Joe Biden as the winner as false and based on results in 4 states that are far from final, confirming that the Trump campaign wants that recount in Georgia, claiming that there were many irregularities in Pennsylvania. In Nevada, the statement alleges thousands of individuals improperly cast mail ballots. And the statement concludes that Biden is relying on these states for his phony claim on the White House. But once the election is final, President Trump will be re-elected. But there is no legal avenue here for the president to pursue unless, in addition to making general statements like thousands of votes were cast illegally in Nevada, he puts up some proof to support those contentions, and so far he has offered none. So it is evident now that within the White House there are ongoing conversations about just how much longer the president can stare at the inevitable and not react appropriately to it. He has said to want to carry on fighting, but at this point things are just moving so rapidly here that even a statement from the Biden campaign now has indicated that if President Trump thinks that he's going to continue sitting in the White House beyond midday on January the 20th, Inauguration Day here in the United States, he will be treated by President-elect Joe Biden as a trespasser and escorted off the premises and dumped unceremoniously on Pennsylvania Avenue right in front of the building. So this is not just Joe Biden now sending the message that he increasingly thinks that he's won and is confident about the outlook here. It's the media, the television networks that pulled Donald Trump off the air last night in the middle of his statement at the White House, again falsely accusing the Democrats of trying to steal the election. It's the Secret Service beginning to prepare for a transition that will ultimately take place on January the 20th at high noon. There's no pathway here for President Trump now to continue being President of the United States. He might be the last person in America to recognize that, but there is no pathway, and those are the facts.
I like the finality of your words there. I understand that the senior-most people in the U.S. military have said that they will not be the ones facilitating the transfer of power in the event of Donald Trump actually digging in his heels and the situation arising where he has to be escorted out as a trespasser. Which agency will be doing the honors is what I want to understand.
Oh, that would be the Secret Service. It would be the Secret Service that basically, were we to get there, and I don't think for a second we will, Palki, but were we to get there, it would be the Secret Service moving into the Oval Office, grabbing him and turfing him out of the building. Look, I think there's more to this than just Donald Trump battling for the presidency. This is Donald Trump and his family battling to try and keep the patriarch safe from the threat of criminal prosecution in New York. Remember, the Department of Justice has long argued that you can't bring a criminal indictment against a sitting president. So to some extent, this is the Trump family seeing just how far they can take it before they have to begin life as civilians and come under the watchful gaze of prosecutors in the Southern District of New York. But even more importantly than that, this is about Donald Trump trying to preserve some political relevance. No one here thinks that having won nearly 70 million votes in this election, more votes Donald Trump won than Barack Obama won in either of his successful quests for the presidency. No one here thinks Donald Trump is going to go silently into the night, shut up his Twitter account, and observe the tradition that America only has one president at a time. Donald Trump knows that even if a third of those people who voted for him are true believers, and the real number's probably higher than that, but even if it was only a third, he can count on the ongoing support of around 25 million Americans. He will continue tweeting at them. He may end up owning a broadcast network and broadcasting to them. He will continue criticizing Joe Biden and insisting that he is an illegitimate president, and he may start grooming another member of his family to run for the presidency in 2024, which is why Republicans have to be so careful now, because they know Donald Trump, out of the White House, controlling the views of around 25 million Americans, maybe more than that, has the potential to be hugely dangerous for the Republican Party in 2024. So they've got tough decisions. So has Donald Trump, and so ultimately has Joe Biden, who's got to figure out how he's going to be an effective president, given what has been an electoral disaster for the Democrats in that they didn't secure the landslide they expected.
Simon Marks, thanks very much. And if we talk on Monday, I hope we have a winner by then. You're going to have a long weekend, I believe. Thank you very much for being with us here tonight.
Cheers, Palki.
Thank you. So you've heard from Joe Biden, you've heard from Donald Trump, you've also heard from journalists on the ground. But what about the people of America? How do they see this delay and this acrimony that seems unending even after the last vote was cast? We heard from some people, some of the voters who cast their vote. Listen into them.
Absolutely. I think we're doing great. Road to 270. Only 6 votes away. I think we're going to get Nevada, and it's going to be a blue wave. Saw the Senate's doing good. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see in the next couple of days once these absentee ballots are all counted.
I just want us all to be united. Like, yes, I voted for Trump, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to go out and get pissed off if he doesn't win. I'm not going to riot. I just want whatever's best for the country.
I've been kind of checking my phone every couple hours just to see if things have changed. And, you know, I would like to see some of these states updating their numbers a little more so we could kind of have a better idea.
I think Trump's doing what he should do. He's positive. He's doing what he thinks is best. He's trying to do. He feels like he got wronged in it, and I think he should investigate it. I think that's his privilege, or anybody running for. This is not just about Trump. This is about having fair elections.
Am out here because our Constitution and our electoral process is being ripped to shreds by a bunch of banana republic socialists who wish to eliminate our Constitution and our way of life. And it's not going to happen. They are summarily going ahead and throwing away votes. They're printing votes. They're burning them.
I think with all the civil unrest that's gone on this year, it's hard not to be a little bit worried. I think you'd be naive not to think that something could happen or could not happen. I'm hoping cooler heads prevail, really. I'd rather not have to see additional police force or National Guard resources brought in, especially against my own citizenry.
So we have told you about what is happening. Now let's answer the why. Why is it taking so long? Why isn't there a result yet? It's all about this, the mail-in ballot. And here is what it looks like. This is a sample ballot from Alaska. It's like a form. You fill it in, you seal it in an envelope, and you mail it. Clearly, this is not an EVM machine. These are paper ballots. They have to be counted by hand. And that's the reason why it's taking so much time for America to get a result. There is a considerable number of votes that still need to be counted. 5 states, as we told you, are yet to announce their results. And this is the status as of this morning in America. Arizona to count 263,000 ballots. Nevada, more than 190,000 ballots are outstanding. In Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, 160,000 ballots. And in North Carolina, more than 116,000 ballots are outstanding. And this was the estimate just a few hours back. The actual numbers may vary, because the votes are being counted as we speak. Georgia may be in a position to announce a result, but they're going for a recount. Other states may take some more time, because the process to count the ballots, verify them and announce the result is an elaborate one. The process may slightly vary across states, but it goes somewhat like this. First, the ballot is verified. It goes to a bipartisan team of election officials. They scan the sealed envelope into the computer system. Then they verify the signature on the envelope with the signature on the voter database. If they don't match, the whole ballot is declared invalid. If the signatures match, then the envelope is unsealed. The ballots are put into a box, fed into a machine that tabulates them. Now, the vote is both available on a computer database as well as a physical copy. Both are stored for verification purposes. Election officials then combine the counts and report it to the county and the state board of elections. Members of political parties sit on these state boards, and no party, by the way, is allowed to have a majority on these boards. Now, these scrutiny, there is scrutiny, in fact, at every step. And all this takes time. It may appear like they're taking forever, but election officials say they're moving at breakneck speed. Take the example of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. They are processing 13,000 votes in 1 hour. That means more than 3 lakh votes in a day are being counted, and yet it's taking days because there are millions of votes to count. An overwhelming number of Americans have voted via mail this time. Under usual circumstances, the result would have been out on the election day itself. But the pandemic is still on, so American voters were given 4 options to cast their vote. If they wanted to vote in person, they could do it early or on election day. Otherwise, they had the option to choose the ballots, fill them up and send them by post, or drop it off at a dedicated drop-off point. A large number of voters picked the mail-in ballot. 64 million postal ballots were sent before the election day itself, and that is a record number. Donald Trump is questioning every mail-in vote, and election officials are choosing accuracy over speed. American poll officers have also rejected the allegations of fraud. But on social media, Trump's claims have taken a life of their own. Fake photographs and misleading stories are being shared and watched by thousands of people. Our next story takes you inside this alternative reality, where Americans believe voter fraud is real.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
Donald Trump started it. Social media is amplifying it. From the moment the American president uttered the word fraud, conspiracy theories have been running wild on the internet. They exist on social media in a world of their own. Enter it and you'll find it. Photographs claiming that voters from 1900 have cast ballots. Screenshots that claim a dead citizen voted in this election. There is even a hashtag SharpieGate. An American political activist says ballots filed with Trump's favorite pen are being rejected. This is what alternative reality looks like. Live inside it for a few days. You'll believe that the elections are being rigged to deny Trump a second term. But take a closer look at these conspiracy-riddled posts again. You'll find how fake these claims are. Like this photograph, it declares that people born in the 1900s are on the voter list. Read the next few tweets in the thread. They point out the names were punched in manually. And the date of birth, the 1st of the 1st of 1900, is actually the default value that the software gives to every new entry. It's safe to say this isn't the real voter database. Then, we have the curious case of William Bradley. Did 118-year-old Bradley rise from his grave to vote in this election? This gentleman claims an absentee ballot was sent in his name. With thousands sharing this tweet, the claim caught the attention of the election officials in Michigan. The Department of State was quick to call out the tweet as fake news. Ballots of dead voters, like the one from William Bradley, have been rejected during the count. The problem of misinformation runs deep. It's not just unknown accounts that are sharing these claims. President Trump's sons floated some theories too.
Cheat us out of it because they know it's their only path to victory.
Eric Trump claimed 80 Trump ballots were burned. They were just sample ballots, not real votes. Trump Jr. shared a video alleging voter fraud in Florida. Reportedly, this feed was pulled from the live stream of an American publication that showed just innocent vote counters doing their jobs. Most experts and polling officials haven't found any merit to Trump's claims of voter fraud. Neither have they found these social media posts legitimate. But the alternative reality is already manifesting on the ground.
We have only rekindled our humanity and only reminded us.
Backers of Donald Trump ramped up demonstrations outside a counting center in Arizona. Reportedly, some of them were carrying guns. Protesters from the other camp gathered too. For now, this is just a verbal duel, but there is every chance of a violent clash. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
In his 4 years as president, Donald Trump has never struggled for airtime. Channels have always loved his no-holds-barred press conferences, but that changed on Thursday. Major American networks cut away from the president while he was speaking. They have a simple explanation for what they did. The president, they said, was lying.
I easily win.
It's the unwritten rule of the American media. When the president speaks, you listen. But Donald Trump has not been a conventional president. His words have divided not just the public, but also American media houses. Thursday, November the 5th. More than 48 hours past Election Day. Donald Trump walks into the White House briefing room.
Thank you.
His messaging is along expected lines.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. There have been a number of disturbing irregularities across the nation.
Stan Grant for this marathon coverage.
This went on for 17 minutes.
Welcome back to...
But many networks lost patience.
And we have to interrupt here because the president has made a number of false
Within minutes,
statements.
they cut away from the president's speech.
Okay, here we are again in the unusual position of not only interrupting the President of the United States, but correcting the President of the United States.
What followed was an exhaustive fact-checking session.
Now tens of millions of unsolicited ballots without...
Most channels, including Trump's ally Fox News, disputed his claims.
What the President of the United States is saying, in large part, is absolutely untrue.
Some Republican leaders, too, demanded evidence. And the Trump campaign is yet to provide any.
And we have to interrupt here because the president has...
If the American media hates Trump, rest assured the feeling is mutual.
Now tens of millions of unsolicited ballots without any...
Fake news, fake media. Fake news has been Trump's slogan for the last 4 years.
Report fake news, which CNN does a lot.
he has accused the media of backing Joe Biden, a claim he repeated on Thursday.
As everyone now recognizes, media polling was election interference in the truest sense of that word by powerful special interests. These really phony polls, I have to call them phony polls, fake polls, were designed to keep our voters at home, create the illusion of momentum for Mr. Biden, and diminish Republicans' ability to raise funds.
In the media and the fake media, they make up stories.
Trump's
They have
speeches
no
are
sources
tricky
in
to
many
cover.
cases. They
He
say
regularly
no
peppers them with falsehoods, often forcing channels to censor his comments. But Trump's falsehoods are also consequential. After all, he occupies the most powerful office in the world. The American media has clearly taken sides in this election. The question is this bias a reflection of Trump's divisiveness or the new normal of American journalism? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, this was touted as the pandemic election, a referendum on Donald Trump's response to the Wuhan virus pandemic. But the discourse has now shifted to election fraud. Does that mean that the cases are falling? Far from it. The US is setting new records. Let me show you some numbers. On November 3rd, that is election day, the US recorded just over 94,000 cases. The next day, more than 108,000 cases, 108,000 cases. Thursday was a world record with 118,000 cases in the US. There is no denying it. The United States is in the middle of a second wave, and from the look of it, it could be bigger than the first one. So how big an issue was the pandemic for voters in America? It depends on who you voted for. Most Biden supporters were more concerned about the pandemic. They were in favor of strict restrictions, possibly even a lockdown. But the average Trump voter prioritized the economy. It was all about reopening the country and bringing back the jobs. 4 in 5 Trump voters said the pandemic was under control. But as we just told you, that's not the case. Whoever wins the White House will have a full-blown outbreak on his hands. So what are the two candidates saying about the pandemic? There is complete silence from Trump. The president seems more focused on the legal battle ahead. But the White House has made it clear. All hopes are now pinned on a vaccine. Joe Biden, meanwhile, has been talking about it. He mentions the Wuhan virus at all public events. On Thursday, his team briefed him on the pandemic and the economic crisis.
Senator Harris and I just completed briefings on both COVID and the economic crisis facing this nation. And we're reminded again of the severity of this pandemic. Cases are on the rise nationwide, and we're nearing 240,000 deaths due to COVID. And our hearts go out to each and every family that has lost a loved one to this terrible disease.
Joe Biden seems willing to take up the challenge, but a Biden victory is unlikely to be a silver bullet. And I'll tell you why. Trump's term ends on the 20th of January next year. That's more than 70 days away. At the current rate, that's 6 million more cases of the Wuhan virus. Plus, Joe Biden does not have a magic wand. Half the country is still opposed to wearing a mask. There are people who still believe the pandemic is a hoax. Bringing Americans together will be key to creating a successful strategy. And a lot of them, by the way, are out. They're protesting on the streets. The Democrats backed mail-in ballots, remember, to maintain social distancing. But now even the Democrats are not asking their supporters to stay at home. So that is a stark reality for America. Biden or Trump, the country is set for a rough couple of months. A new president cannot end the pandemic. Only a vaccine can. And this wait has been grueling. But social media is doing all it can to keep it light. The long delay has triggered a meme fest on the internet. At the receiving end are Donald Trump and the state of Nevada. Take a look.
The United States of America, the land of the free, the temple of democracy, the gold standard of bipartisan politics. And today, the perfect meme material. 3 days, still no result. Forget the American people. Social media is losing patience. And what better way to overcome the tension than with memes? The internet is flooded with them. On Thursday, Nevada was the fan favorite. Its 6 electoral votes would have given Biden the White House. But the state had different plans.
Tuesday, Thursday, April, August, autumn, winter, next year, some year.
I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't want to do the work today.
Don't know why I'm tired. I haven't done anything.
The race in Pennsylvania also drew some laughs. It's close, but maybe not this close.
Made up. That had to be 10 yards on a very fast Buda Baker, and he just tracked it.
This election is not going well for the average American. Wake up, refresh the result page, repeat. It's a lot of pressure, and there seems to be no end in sight. For the Democrats, postal ballots saved the day. Much like Captain America saved Thor in Avengers. Don't remember? Here's a recap.
Is that everyone? What, you wanted more?
The best memes, however, were reserved for Donald Trump. Hashtag Trump meltdown was trending. The president's claim of vote rigging was perfect cannon fodder.
You're having fun. It's time to go. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Come on. Give the ball to someone else. Give the ball to someone else. Give the ball to someone else. Mr. President, give the ball to someone else. Give it to someone else. Give it to someone. Here.
As it became clear that Trump won't go down without a fight, social media imagined what a transfer of power could possibly look like. Not an ideal situation. Even teen climate activist Greta Thunberg joined in on the fun. Here's what she had to say. Chill, Donald, chill. Giving Trump's advice right back to him. The stakes could not be higher than they are right now. But the fact that people are finding time to laugh is encouraging.
Girl, it's plain to see when you're the only one for me. And repeat steps 1 through 3.
And by the looks of it, we have a whole weekend of memes ahead of us.
You about to lose your job. Hit this deck. You about to lose your job, cause you are detaining me for nothing. You about to lose your job.
Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
Really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today. I don't want to do the work today.
Before I end the show, let me tell you about some news coming out of America's all-weather foe, Russia. Reports suggest the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, may be stepping down next year. Remember, Putin is Russia's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The constitution of Russia was recently amended to allow Putin to remain in office till 2036. That's 16 years to go. Why then is there news of him stepping down? Reports say Vladimir Putin has Parkinson's. Take a look.
Is Russian President Vladimir Putin stepping down next year? Reports seem to suggest so. There's speculation worldwide, and like you can see, the reason being suggested is Parkinson's. Putin supposedly has the Parkinson's disease. Questions are being raised about the strongman's health, some even suggesting that his legs were seen shivering, and that Putin was seen holding on to his armrest in pain. There's no video evidence of this. It was not long ago that Putin was being described as the most macho leader roaming this planet. He was photographed riding a snowmobile, showing off his judo moves, playing ice hockey, operating a hand glider, scuba diving, and swimming in freezing Siberian lakes. There were also photos of him shooting a tiger with a tranquilizer dart, shooting a polar bear. Some said Putin's colorful life made other world leaders look pretty dull. There's no doubt that the 68-year-old Putin has a reputation of an outdoor adventurous man. And that makes us wonder how legit these reports are. So instead of speculating, let us first tell you what Parkinson's disease really is. It is a nervous system disorder. It results from the gradual breakdown of nerve cells in the brain. Sometimes is hereditary. At times people develop Parkinson's with age. The probability is higher for men. A person with Parkinson's may experience tremors or shaking. Over time, the disease may also show the patient's movement, impair his or her posture, change the way he or she speaks or writes. The bad news is that Parkinson's is not curable, but Kremlin says there's nothing to worry. Putin not planning to resign. That's the big bold headline of the Russian state agency. It comes with an assurance that Putin is in excellent health. Good for Kremlin. But say, even if Putin were to resign, he would not need to worry about any legal trouble. There's a bill being tabled in Russia. It extends a former president's immunity from prosecution. Ex-presidents already enjoy a lifetime immunity. But that's for crimes committed in office. If this bill is passed, the immunity will apply to any crime committed in the president's lifetime, meaning Putin can poison a rival even after leaving office, and he will not be prosecuted for it. Just saying. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Who knows what else this year has in store? 2 more months to go. Fingers crossed. We're taking a break, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Gravitas, co-presented by SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life. Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Amstrad, get real, get Amstrad. Today Tonight, in association with PolicyBazaar.com. Usha Bloom series fans, Zindagi Kil Utte. Blue Dart, if it's important, Blue Dart it. Cookie, Smart Vital, get the power of 4 health devices on your wrist. Good evening and a very warm welcome. You're watching WION World as One with me, Alison Grange. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines. US President Donald Trump's campaign team issues a letter saying that the election is not over. The false projections of Joe Biden as the winner is based on results in 4 states that are far from final.
There were a little under 5,500 votes left to be counted in Gwinnett, Floyd, Cherokee, and Cobb County.
The fate of Georgia's 16 electoral votes hangs in the balance as the race Georgia heads into recount. Officials say the process to start soon. Austria orders the closure of radical mosques after Monday's deadly attack by jihadists in Vienna, in which 4 people were killed. The country's interior ministry to brief the media on the details of the closures shortly. Media reports indicate that Russian President Vladimir Putin is planning to step down as early as January next year. Reports also suggest that Putin has taken the decision as he is suffering from Parkinson's disease. The Kremlin denies all reports pertaining to Russian president's health. In the first high-level interaction since tensions over Nepal's new political map, Indian Army Chief General M.M. Naravani has called on Nepal's Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Ali and discussed bilateral relations. The meeting between General Naravani and Ali, who is also the Defence Minister of Nepal, took place at his official residence. Facebook bans a rapidly growing pro-Trump group on the social media platform for threats of violence. The Stop the Steal group, which called for boots on the ground to protect the integrity of the vote, was adding 1,000 new members every 10 seconds and had grown to 365,000 members in a single day. Chinese Vice Premier praises Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam for rising to challenges of security law, pandemic in Hong Kong and reviving the economy in the semi-autonomous territory. Earlier, the Beijing-backed leader postponed her annual policy address in order to travel to China. US Election 2020. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services. Transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra. Life's wonderful moments. Styled by Myntra. Driven by Ford. Presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus. Isko laga dala to full family jingalala. Good evening and welcome. Let's start this bulletin with Georgia. This was one of the key battleground states that has been closely watched for results that could name the winner in the U.S. election. Now, as the votes were counted, it was being called too close to call. Of the slightly more than 5 million votes, the margin is now only a few thousand between the two candidates. Gabrielle Sterling, who is Georgia State's voting system implementation manager, has now officially announced that there will be a recount in the state.
As of 10 a.m., there were a little under 5,500 votes left to be counted in Gwinnett, Floyd, Cherokee, and Cobb County. In addition, there are 8,890 military ballots outstanding that will be counted if they were returned by the close of business today. Right now, Georgia remains too close to call. Out of approximately 5 million votes cast, we'll have a margin of a few thousand. The focus for our office and for the county election officials for now remains on making sure that every legal vote is counted and recorded accurately. As we are closing in on a final count, we can begin to look toward our next steps. With a margin that small, there will be a recount in Georgia.
Joe Biden is taking a lead in the state of Georgia, while the vote share of both Biden and Trump is 49.4%. Biden is leading by 917 votes. Now remember, the state of Georgia has 16 electoral states. Georgia is also a state that Trump cannot afford to lose. Biden's mail-in ballot advantage has pulled him up on scoreboard as results came in from Fulton County around Atlanta, with 99% of the state vote counted. Reports. And Trump cannot find a way to the 270 electoral votes without Georgia and Pennsylvania. So his chances of securing re-election will hinge on the developments in these two states in the coming hours. However, the state isn't sealed yet, and we may not get a call for a while. This is a very close competition along a Republican stronghold. Southern Georgia has recently become more of a battleground state due to its growing black electorate. Georgia last voted for a Democratic president in 1992, with Bill Clinton taking 43.47% of the vote to George H.W. Bush's 42.88%. With Joe Biden chipping away at Trump's leads in states crucial to any chance of the president getting the 270 electoral votes, if Biden holds his lead and wins the state of Georgia, Trump's hopes of retaining the White House will be dashed and Joe Biden will be declared the president-elect. Now, for more on this, Sarah Walton is joining us live from New York. Thank you for being with us. Now, we have just received the update that Georgia is going to be recounting. And we know that with a margin of less than 0.5% of the votes cast, that a request must be made in 2 days of this result being certified. Different states have different rules. With this being a recount now in Georgia, are we expecting recounts in other outstanding states?
I mean, I think that will come down to how close other states end up being. You heard about a day or so ago that Donald Trump's campaign group said that they were going to ask for a recount in Wisconsin. But if we look back at electoral history in the United States, recounts don't tend to lead to massively different results. Wisconsin did have a recount in the 2016 election where Donald Trump narrowly won that state over Hillary Clinton. What that recount found was a couple of hundred more votes, which also went to Donald Trump. So, I mean, even with narrow margins of, what are we, around 1,000 votes really in it in Georgia at the moment, it may not be that a recount could overturn anything larger than that. So in other states that are coming in, I mean, if you look at some of the results now at the moment, I mean, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden currently has a lead of about 6,000 votes. It's much larger at the moment in Nevada and Arizona. Certainly something like Arizona at the moment, Joe Biden leading by about 43,000 votes. That is not the kind of margin that is likely to be overturned with a recount. And of course, a recount in somewhere like Georgia is not going to help Donald Trump if he can't win Pennsylvania. If Joe Biden wins Pennsylvania, then it is all over, no matter what happens with recounts.
Absolutely. But Trump has made it clear that it is not just the recount that is the only avenue available to him. He has said that he will be going to the courts and taking it further that way. What do we make of the legalities of this?
Well, I think you've got lawyers right across the United States looking at that right now. We had a statement from the Trump campaign earlier saying that they believe, particularly in Pennsylvania and Nevada, there are irregularities and improperly cast ballots. We've seen press conferences given by representatives, lawyers representing the president and Republican groups across the country. But they've yet to present any evidence, and at least one legal challenge that's been brought has been thrown out by the judge that it was brought before, because he said that the lawyers representing the Republican groups there had simply not made a case. They hadn't presented any solid evidence that there was any wrongdoing. President Trump himself, when he gave a speech in the White House last night in the United States, he said he intended to go to the Supreme Court to challenge the results. I mean, that's not the way that the legal system in the United States does work. It has to go through lower courts first. So that is potentially what the Trump administration would be attempting to do. But as I say, as yet, they are yet to bring any solid evidence of the irregularities they are claiming.
Absolutely. And now we know that protests are going on in various parts of the country. And with Trump's rhetoric of claiming that votes have been rigged and they are stealing the election, this is very divisive talk, very divisive rhetoric from Trump in an already divided America.
Yeah, people here are very concerned about what may occur in the streets in the next few days. We've seen, particularly in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, where some really crucial votes are being counted. There have been protests outside the convention center where those counts are happening, and actually the police are investigating what they believe was a plan for an attack on that convention center. One person has been arrested. But I mean, even here in New York, this is a state that voted very clearly for Joe Biden, but coming through the center of New York, there are still many shops and buildings that are boarded up. And if there is more, if this does become more contentious, I think there is a real worry that it will begin to lead to tensions on the street.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you very much for bringing us all the latest out of New York. Now, what about Donald Trump's opponent, Joe Biden? Well, I've said this in the past, and I will say this again. This man is no saint. He is the current lead in opinion polls, but this shouldn't be mistaken for evidence that he is the best person to lead America. Biden is guilty of the same crimes that he often accuses Trump of. He has been called racist. He has been called a predator. He has been accused of lying frequently, and he is equally bad at debates, maybe worse. But the American media just can't stop singing praises of Mr. Joe Biden. Our next report gets you the stories that you must know about this presidential nominee, stories that the American media may or may not tell you.
The current president has cloaked American darkness for much too long. Too much anger, too much fear, too much division. Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I'll be an ally of the light, not the darkness.
He promises to draw on the best of American citizens. He promises to be an ally of light, not of darkness. Yet, in the 47 years of his political career, this presidential nominee has done exactly the opposite. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. has built his career by betraying the promises he makes. The man who's blaming Donald Trump for cloaking America in darkness was once accused of doing the exact same thing. Our story begins in 1971. Joe Biden was a Senate representative for the Newcastle County Council and was openly fighting for the cause of segregationists. As an anti-busing crusader, he vehemently opposed the practice of desegregating schools for Black Americans. His disdain for the black community prevailed in the years that followed. But in 1993, Biden took his racist rhetoric one step further and gave this speech.
We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct, but for simple, pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets.
He called black Americans predators who were roaming free on the streets. An accusation that keeps coming back to bite him. Because Biden himself has been called a predator in the guise of a politician. In the last 2 decades, at least 8 women have alleged that Biden either touched them inappropriately or violated their personal space. Questionable acts such as these have earned him the title of Creepy Joe. American voters saw how bad Biden was in a debate. Most of his arguments fell flat. They were ripped apart by his own running mate, Kamala Harris.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision. So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
Switch to 2020. Joe Biden is now the official US presidential nominee of the Democratic Party, backed by his campaign team and the American media. He has been consistently pummeling his opponent Trump in opinion polls and is said to be proving the naysayers wrong. But can he? Biden is still facing some strong accusations that could damage his candidacy. The Biden family's alleged dealings with Ukraine are still making headlines. On the 18th of August, Donald Trump retweeted this audio clip. A leaked conversation between Biden and former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. The clip doesn't reveal much, but questions remain, and Biden is not doing enough to address them. As Donald Trump escalates his attacks in back-to-back press conferences, Biden is not taking any questions from the press. The last time he did was on the 28th of July. In the 3.5 weeks that have followed, this presidential nominee has shuttered himself from the media. How long can he afford to do this? The presidential campaign is heating up. His only USP right now is that he's not the man he's fighting. Donald Trump. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The US presidential election is on a knife's edge. While the polls have tilted in favor of Democrat Joe Biden for now, President Trump is already making headlines by alleging that he was being cheated. He even went to court to try and stop more votes from being counted. Even as counting continues and the results are too close to call, global reactions are pouring in. While some leaders are pointing flaws in the US electoral system, others have called it a spectacle. Now let's start with Russia. The Foreign Ministry said that outdated legislation and a lack of regulation had revealed flaws in the US electoral system. The Foreign Ministry's spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, has said that both the candidates had an equal chance of winning, and she also called the US electoral process archaic during her weekly press briefing. Zakharova has also said that it was important to avoid any occurrence of mass riots in the US. Now remember, the security has been beefed up across multiple cities, anticipating civil unrest as both protesters and supporters of the Trump administration await results. Now, even on Kenya's television news, the US election is the top priority. There are more than 20,000 Americans in Kenya, so the interest in the election outcome runs high. In fact, bets and memes followed as Kenyans followed polling trends across social media platforms.
We follow with keen interest because there are lots of Kenyans in the diaspora who live in the United States. We receive about 100 billion shillings in diaspora remittances every year as a country. So therefore we have a lot of relatives who stay there. We follow with keen interest what is happening there.
Even though tensions have run high between the US and China in recent months, Beijing residents watched the tight race glued to their TV sets with a mix of curiosity and excitement. Meanwhile, in Iran, the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei mocked the delayed results and likened it to a spectacle. In addition, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said that no matter who the next US president is, he will have to surrender to Iran. Now remember that the Trump administration has led a campaign of maximum pressure against Iran, even pulling Washington out of a multilateral deal on Iran's nuclear program. Albeit across France, Germany, Italy, Cuba or Mexico, the controversial US election dominated the news cycle everywhere. And even now, with no president in sight, the anticipation runs high across the world. Earlier today, we talked to DW correspondent Chelsea Delaney on the reactions and the implications of the US presidential elections across Europe. Listen in.
Well, many European governments have really been trying to hold off on making any definitive comments on these election results because, of course, it has not yet been decided. And many of these states that will decide the election are still very, very close. So many governments, of course, don't want to make any comments about this until we know, because they will have to work with the president for many years now. But we have seen a lot of concern and a lot of criticism from Europe of the comments that President Trump has been making over the past couple of days, the premature election victory statements that he made on election night, as well as these comments over the past couple of days alleging that the election has been rigged, that the absentee ballots that are still being counted are illegal. It is, of course, legal to vote by absentee ballot in the United States, and even many Republicans, Fox News, the president's favorite channel, have really distanced themselves from those comments. But here in Europe, we've heard a lot of criticism, for example, from Heiko Maas, the German foreign minister. He said earlier today that America is more than a one-man show, and anyone who's pouring oil on this fire is acting irresponsibly. So certainly a lot of concern here that these comments are really undercutting the U.S. election institutions. But of course, we're going to have to see exactly how this plays out over the next couple of hours to see what this could mean for EU-US relations.
Now, moving on to our next story, is Russian President Vladimir Putin suffering from Parkinson's disease? Now, according to various media reports, Putin is planning to step down as early as January of next year. Reports also suggest that Putin has taken the decision as he is suffering from the nervous system disorder. The allegations on Putin's health were first made by a critic of the Russian president, Professor Valery Solovey, and who has also alleged that Putin's gymnast lover, Alina Kabeva, along with his daughters, Maria Vorontsova and Katerina Tikhonova, have been urging him to step down. This after concerns were raised over the 68-year-old president's deteriorating health. Now, Professor Valery Solovey has said, and I quote, "There is a family. It has a great influence on him. He intends to make public his handover plans in January," unquote. The Parkinson's disease leads to a disorder in the nervous system. Now, reports suggest that Putin is showing early symptoms. Some observers note that Putin's legs are in constant state of motion, and others note that Putin was recently struggling to hold a pen steadily in his hand. Now, some have even pointed a finger at his gunslinger gait, which is Putin's signature style of walking, with the shorter swing of the right arm. However, this has already been dismissed by British Medical Journal in 2015. Which stated that the style of walking may be the result of KGB weaponry training. Now, where trainees are taught to keep their right hand close to the chest while walking, allowing them to quickly draw a gun when faced with a foe. The Kremlin, meanwhile, has dismissed reports questioning Putin's health. Kremlin's spokesman and Deputy Chief of Staff Dmitry Peskov has called them complete nonsense. The Kremlin claims that Putin has no plans to retire. Adding to the speculation over Putin's health is his backing to a bill that will virtually grant him immunity for life. And critics say that this is a clear indication that Putin is planning to retire and hand over power to a successor. The new bill would make Putin a senator for life and guarantee him lifelong immunity after office. Immunity would be extended to all Russian presidents once they leave office. The bill still needs the backing of a two-thirds majority from Russia's twin legislative chambers before it is ascended to law. And observers say that the bill is an indication that Putin is planning a transfer of power. Putin's camp once again dismissed reports linking the new bill to any plans to step down. Putin's spokesperson, again Dmitry Peskov, says, and I quote, "This is a practice that is being applied in many countries of the world, and it is quite justified. This is not innovation from the point of view of international practice." And with that, we've come to the end of this broadcast. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to WION World as one for all your global news and updates. Today Tonight, in association with PolicyBazaar.com. Usha Bloom series fans, Zindagi Kil Utte. Blue Dart, if it's important, Blue Dart it. Goki, Smart Vital, get the power of 4 health devices on your wrist. Good evening and a very warm welcome. You're watching WION World as One with me, Alison Grange. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines. US President Donald Trump's campaign team issues a letter saying that the election is not over. The false projection of Joe Biden as the winner is based on results in 4 states that are far from final. Media reports indicate that Russian President Vladimir Putin is planning to step down as early as January of next year. The reports also suggest that Putin has taken the decision as he is suffering from Parkinson's disease. The Kremlin denies all reports pertaining to the Russian president's health. Austria orders the closure of radical mosques after Monday's deadly attack by jihadists in Vienna, in which 4 people were killed. The country's interior ministry to brief the media on the details of the closures shortly.
There were a little under 5,500 votes left to be counted in Gwinnett, Floyd, Cherokee, and Cobb County.
The fate of Georgia's 16 electoral votes still hangs in the balance as Georgia heads into a recount. Officials say the process of recounting votes is to start soon. In the first high-level interaction since tensions over Nepal's new political map, Indian Army Chief General M.M. Naravane called on Nepal's Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Ali and discussed the bilateral relations. The meeting between the General Naravane and Ali, who is also the Defence Minister of Nepal, took place at his official residence. US Election 2020. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services. Transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra. Life's wonderful moments. Styled by Myntra. Driven by Ford. Presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus. Isko laga dala to full family jingalala. Welcome. Let's start this bulletin with Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden closing in on the 270. The Trump campaign has made claims of fraud and threatened multiple legal actions to stall presidential verdict. In our next report, we are going to break down how the states see the recount law. Each state has its own rules and regulations. Now, first up is the battleground state of Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden has taken a lead with 49.5% of the votes, followed by Trump with 49.4% of the votes. The difference in votes is only 5,594 votes. In Pennsylvania, there is an automatic provision for a recount. As per the law, the recount happens automatically if the margin of victory is less than or equal to 0.5%. But for a recount to happen, Automatically, the deadline is 5 p.m. by the second Thursday following the election, which means the 12th of November. Now, just a while ago, the recounting of votes in Georgia was announced. Georgia was the closest to finish its counting. Less than 10,000 votes to be counted. It has become a fight to the finish right now. Both Biden and Trump have 49.4% of the vote share, and Biden is leading by a small margin of just 917 votes. However, there is no provision of an automatic recount in Georgia. As per the law, a candidate can request a recount if the margin of victory is less than or equal to 0.5%. And the recount must be requested within 2 business days after the results have been certified. Now, there is no result yet, but both Biden and Trump camps have read what they had from the latest tally. Both sides put out statements earlier this evening, both contrary to one another and taking potshots at the other. Let's start with the statement put out by the Trump campaign. It's a pretty long one indeed, and has been signed by Trump's campaign general counsel, Matt Morgan, and here's what it reads. The election is not over. The false projection of Joe Biden as the winner is based on results in 4 states that are far from final. Now, the Trump campaign goes on to claim there were many irregularities in Pennsylvania without providing any evidence. Trump's team also claims that in Nevada, thousands of individuals cast ballots improperly. Now, we do not know what they mean by improper, and the campaign has again not provided any evidence to back their claims. The statement from the Trump campaign also goes on to name Fox News and Associated Press. What for? The campaign claims that they are erroneously called Arizona in favor of Biden, only to add that the president is quote-unquote on course to win Arizona outright. Now, here's how the statement ends. Biden is relying on these states for his phony claim on the White House. But once the election is final, President Trump will be re-elected. Let's now look at the statement put out by the Biden campaign. Now, as we said, on the 19th of July, the American people will decide this election, and the United States government is perfectly capable of escorting trespassers out of the White House. Numbers have changed quite a lot since these statements were put out. All the latest ahead in this bulletin. Now, WION correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York for more on this. Susan, thank you for being with us. This has been a record-breaking election on a number of fronts, and we've seen unprecedented actions. Take us through, we know that Georgia is going into a recount. Take us through some of the key battleground states that are yet to be decided.
That's right. Only a handful left, really. Georgia has announced that there will be a recount because there has been such a small margin and it's hard to determine. We have to take into consideration that Pennsylvania may take longer than expected, although we were waiting for results coming in the next few hours, just because they say that military ballots, about 9,000 military ballots, have not been counted yet. So those need to come in. We need to figure out what's happening with there. And then we have Arizona, which, despite the fact that, 2 news organizations and wires prematurely announced the victory, those votes haven't been counted. Either North Carolina is most probably going to stay with Donald Trump. We're waiting for results on that as well. And Alaska as well, usually voting Republican. That's only 1 electoral vote, but we can't not invite Alaska to the party since we're in an election right now.
Right. And Susan, this legal tussle, Trump has alleged voter fraud. He's used some very strong language with no evidence. He's potentially using a dangerous attempt at undermining democracy. Take us through some of the legalities that apply to this.
Right. Well, first of all, Donald Trump needs to have a case. He needs to have evidence. He said that there are evidence, and I think everyone is looking for the Trump campaign to come out with concrete evidence. And if this has happened, it's very likely, and I've talked to Democratic and Republican strategists alike, that they will look into it. It's not that because Donald Trump is saying it and they don't like Donald Trump, they're just going to basically refuse his claims. But the problem right now is they have not provided any evidence to the American people. And by making these claims, ultimately undermines the people that went out and voted and stood in line or voted by mail-in ballots due to the coronavirus pandemic. They're now questioning whether or not their vote's going to be counted or not. So it kind of creates this kind of uncertainty around the validity of America's election. I think that's why you see a lot of Republicans not really coming out openly and supporting the president. We had Ted Cruz come out. We had a few other supporters like Matt Gaetz that always support the president come out. But they didn't really come out and say there was fraud. They said, if you have evidence, we support you. Come out and we'll take a look at it. But so far, we haven't seen any. What I do know is that in some states, the Trump campaign has provided hotlines, phone numbers for people who witness anything suspicious to call them and let them know so they can go and see what's going on over there. This itself kind of seems a little shaky, you know, to provide a hotline for ordinary people to go out and see if they see anything suspicious. It just shows that the grounds aren't very stable regarding these claims. And it's a dangerous one. It's a dangerous path to go down if you don't have evidence.
Absolutely. And we see it playing out on the streets. There are protests going on in different parts of the country. People are boarding up their shops in anticipation of violence. What is the latest that you're hearing on this?
That's right. Law enforcement is on high alert, as you know, and have reported there's been skirmishes and violence and back and forth confrontations between the police and protesters. Here in New York, the protesters are demanding to, quote unquote, count all votes. That's what usually happens with democratic cities, progressive cities, liberal cities. On the other side, you have the president's supporters who are saying stop the vote, which on the one hand seems pretty bizarre to until just a few days ago. That's how we made decisions on presidential elections. We don't just stop the vote. But I guess their argument is ballots that come in after a certain time and a certain date for certain states should be stopped. And you know, the states have adhered to these policies and the rule of law until now. I mean, once again, there's been no evidence that they haven't, or they've sort of counted a bunch of votes that came in at a certain hour. That hasn't happened, but it just shows what a strong platform these two candidates and leaders have, that when they make a claim or they ask something, their supporters just come out in the street and start protesting and sometimes creating violence and arrests and unrest.
Right.
Like we saw here in New York and Washington.
Absolutely. Susan, thank you very much for bringing us all the latest on the U.S. elections. Now, the U.S. presidential election is down to 5 key battleground states. The two candidates are leading and trailing by a few decimal points. The decision to take the matter to court has not turned out to be in favor of the Trump campaign. He has lost court rulings in 2 closely contested states. In Georgia, the state that has just announced a recount, the Trump campaign alleged that 53 late arriving ballots were mixed with the on-time ballots. Now, a judge in Georgia has said that there is no evidence that the ballots in question were invalid. In Michigan, the Trump campaign sought to stop the vote count and demand greater access to the tabulation process. Now, in this case, the court has said, and I quote, no basis to find substantial likelihood of success on the merits. The Trump campaign has vowed to bring a new lawsuit challenging what they call voting irregularities in Nevada. Trump's aides have time and again fallen short of providing evidence to support their allegations. But election officials who are working on the ground say that there is no evidence of improper ballots being processed. Now remember, Georgia, Nevada and Pennsylvania are 3 of 5 battleground states where the vote counting is still ongoing. Now, these 3 states will play a crucial role in determining who will win the presidency. On the other hand, Joe Biden has already won Michigan by 3% more votes than Trump. The election legal experts say that Trump's legal strategy is unlikely to have a decisive impact on the outcome of the election. A number of battleground states are still too early to call. Various predictions are trickling in, but everyone is refraining from declaring a winner. Allegations of fraud leveled by Donald Trump has made an already divisive election even more complicated. Election officials are working on the ground and they claim that there are no notable instances of voter fraud. Listen in to the Associated Press White House reporter for perspective on the latest developments.
Biden campaign has been fairly calm and confident since election night. They seem to think that the math is on their side. Obviously, they're closely watching some of these returns come in, same way the Trump campaign is. But they are not reacting to every single thing the president or the president's aides say. They're trying to stay calm and level-headed and sort of let the math, from their standpoint, speak for itself. The Trump campaign publicly is being is confident about Pennsylvania, confident about some of the other battlegrounds. Privately, it's a very different story. They're starting to come to grips with some of the math there. We're seeing trends, particularly in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, the race tightening, president's lead in election day vote, which we expected, being whittled away day by day as mail ballots that were cast legally before Election Day have been counted. Those take a little bit longer to count, and they're counted after those Election Day votes. So as those come in, we're seeing the margins tighten, and potentially we may start to see Joe Biden take the lead. That's one of those things that we're looking for.
Social media giant Facebook has taken down a rapidly growing pro-Trump group from the platform. The group has been removed from Facebook for posting violent rhetoric and baseless claims about Democrats stealing the election. Facebook spokesperson in a statement said the group was organized around the delegitimization of the election process, and they saw worrying calls for violence from its members. The Stop the Steal group, which called for boots on the ground to protect the integrity of the vote, was adding 1,000 new members every 10 seconds on Thursday and had grown to huge numbers of 365,000 members in a single day. Now, according to Facebook, the move was in line with the exceptional measures the social media giant is taking during this period of heightened tension. However, supporters of the group criticized the deletion, saying that the move came without any warning. Chris Barron, a spokesman for the group, said that their political opponents were also voicing concerns over the election being stolen and organizing for protests, but did not face the same problems. Donald Trump and his Republican supporters have been laying the groundwork to cast doubt on the integrity of the mail-in voting for months now. Several social media companies have been showing less patience for election-related disinformation on their sites. On Thursday, Snapbank's Snapchat removed a video from Trump's account in which Biden said that he has an extensive voter fraud organization. Biden's statement came during an interview in which he was discussing his team fighting voter suppression efforts. Several states continue to count the votes as Joe Biden closes in on the 270. U.S. President Donald Trump has once again repeated his claim of victory in a late-night press conference. Now, Trump has been alleged of unleashing a torrent of misinformation in the speech. Several U.S. television networks halted the live coverage of Trump's address after concluding that the president was undermining the legitimacy of the U.S. election. Now, Trump had tried to commandeer the nation's airwaves at a time when the evening newscasts were shown on the East Coast. After a day when the slow drip of vote counting revealed his leads in Pennsylvania and Georgia dwindling, in his speech, Trump claimed that he will win if legal votes are counted. He also alleged that local election officials are working to hand the victory to Joe Biden.
People know what's happening and they see what's happening and it's before their eyes. And there are many instances which will be reported very shortly. There's tremendous litigation going on. And this is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election. And we can't let that happen. Detroit and Philadelphia, known as two of the most corrupt political places anywhere in our country, easily cannot be responsible for engineering the outcome of a presidential race, a very important presidential race.
Social media quickly exploded with comments about Trump's speech. Many were angered by Trump's rhetoric because the claims were made without any supporting evidence. US Election 2020. Co-powered by Tata Consultancy Services. Transforming India. Co-powered by Myntra. Life's wonderful moments. Styled by Myntra. Driven by Ford. Presenting new Ford Endeavour Sport. Meet the other side of you. In association with Tata Sky Binge Plus. Isko laga dala to full family jingalala. Moving on to some other stories now, major developments are coming in from Vienna. The Austrian government has shut down 2 radical Islamic mosques in the wake of the deadly terror attack that killed 4 people and injured 15 earlier this week. Addressing a press conference, Austrian Interrogation Minister Suzanne Raab has said that the mosque and an Islamic association frequented by the attacker have been closed. Raab further said that these 2 sites aided the attacker's radicalization.
Based on the information provided by the Ministry of the Interior, and in particular due to the popular radicalization of the perpetrator within this mosque, and with the rest of the public safety and order in mind, the mosque is to be closed. I invited the President of the Muslim community to the Federal Chancellery this morning and informed him of this fact. We have ordered the closure of the radical mosque and the withdrawal of its status as a recognized Islamic authority. The mosque will therefore be closed.
Im Sinne des Islamgesetzes abzuerkennen.
The 20-year-old attacker, Kujtim Fezulani, has paid regular visits to the 2 sites in Vienna's western suburbs after he was recently released from a prison on completing a convincing de-radicalization program. Now, one is the Melet Ibrahim Mosque in the Otterkring district, and the other is the Tewhid Mosque in the Meidling area. Now, according to domestic intelligence input, only one of the 2 mosques was registered as a religious site. Vienna's anti-terror chief has also been suspended after the deadly attacks that rocked the Austrian capital on Monday. Vienna Police President Gerhard Perstel has said, and I quote, "The head of the Regional Office for the Protection of the Constitution and Anti-Terrorism asked me to suspend his functions because he doesn't want to stand in the way of an orderly inquiry and explanation of the events surrounding the attack," unquote. On Monday, 5 people, including the terrorists, were killed in Vienna when the attacker went on a shooting rampage. And that's a wrap on this broadcast. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to WION World as One for all your news.